Nobody gave a damn about Naruto Uzumaki. Not the village, not the system, not God himself. So you know what he did? He became something so terrifying that the entire shinobi world had to invent a new category just to describe how screwed they were. Let's dive into it.
They say that every village has a monster, a thing that lurks beneath the skin of civilization, kept in check by laws and fear and the polite agreement among powerful people that certain doors should stay closed. Konoha had two. The first was a nine-tailed fox sealed inside a newborn child on the night the fourth Hokage died. Everyone knew about that one. They whispered about it, prayed it would never break free. The second monster was the child himself. And by the time the village realized that the fox was never the thing they should have been afraid of, it was already far, far too late. This is the story of Naruto Uzumaki, not the version you know, not the loud, bright-eyed orphan begging the world to see him. That version doesn't exist here. That version died in an alley when he was 5 years old, replaced by something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Something that looked at a world built on the backs of warriors and gods and thought, with absolute mathematical certainty, that none of it could touch him. He was right. The alley smelled like fish guts and old rain. Naruto was 5, small for his age, blonde hair that hadn't yet turned, blue eyes that still held something soft, something hopeful, something that wouldn't survive the next 4 minutes. He'd been walking home from the orphanage. Home being a generous word for the one-room apartment the third Hokage had arranged, the one with the broken heater and the landlord who spat at his door every morning. 3 men blocked the alley's exit, civilians, drunk. One of them held a bottle, another had a fistful of rocks, the third just had hate, which was enough. "There it is," the first one slurred. "The demon. My brother died because of you," the second said. "My wife?" The third whispered. "My son." Naruto backed up. His shoulders hit the wall. "I didn't. I'm not." The first rock hit him in the chest, except it didn't. It stopped. 3 inches from his sternum, the rock simply halted in midair, hanging there like it had forgotten what gravity was. The world went silent. Even the drunk men stared. Then the rock reversed direction. It moved 3 times faster going back than it had coming in. It caught the man who threw it square in the mouth. Teeth exploded. Blood sprayed. He dropped like someone had cut his strings. The second man threw his handful of rocks. 5 of them. They all stopped. They all reversed. One hit his knee and shattered it. Another caught him in the temple. He went down twitching. The third man swung his bottle. It was the worst decision he would ever make. The bottle stopped against Naruto's raised forearm, cracked, and every shard reversed outward like shrapnel from a grenade. The man screamed and hit the ground with glass embedded in his face, his chest, his hands. Naruto stood in the middle of 3 bleeding, unconscious men. He looked at his hands. There was no blood on them. Not a scratch, not a bruise, not a single mark to suggest anything had touched him at all. He looked at the blood on the ground that was not his. Something shifted behind his eyes. Something fundamental. Not rage, not sadness, not even understanding. Just a quiet, tectonic realignment of who he was and who he would ever be. The soft thing in his eyes, the hopeful thing, the please love me thing, went out like a candle flame pinched between 2 fingers. He stepped over the bodies, walked out of the alley, and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He stopped wanting their approval. He stopped wanting anything from them. Years later, when they asked him why he never cared what the village thought, he would tilt his head and say something that would become the most quoted line in the history of the shinobi world. "Why would a god care what weeds think?" The Anbu filed their report within the hour. 3 civilians hospitalized. 1 with a shattered jaw, reconstructive surgery required. 1 with a fractured skull and permanent nerve damage. 1 with 47 glass fragments embedded in his body. The perpetrator, a 5-year-old boy, no jutsu detected. No hand signs observed. No chakra spike registered on the monitoring seals. The third Hokage read the report 3 times. Then he summoned his most trusted censor, a Hyuga elder, and had the boy examined. "His chakra network is wrong," the Hyuga said, Byakugan bulging. "The Tenketsu are active, all of them, but the flow is unlike anything I've seen. It's not circular, it's reflective, like a mirror made of energy. Anything that approaches is calculated, analyzed, and returned along an inverted vector at amplified force. Hiruzen frowned. In simpler terms, he can't be touched by anything. The energy around his body performs autonomous defensive calculations faster than any conscious mind could process. Kinetic force, thermal energy, even ambient chakra, it all reverses upon contact. Is it the Nine Tails? No. The Hyuga paused, clearly disturbed. This has nothing to do with the fox. This is something in the boy himself. His brain operates at a computational level I cannot quantify. It's as if his mind is a living formula, constantly solving the mathematics of every physical interaction around him in real time. Hiruzen sat back and closed his eyes. He'd spent 12 years trying to protect this boy from the village. It had never occurred to him that the village might need to be protected from the boy. "Tell no one about this," he said quietly. "Lord Third?" No one. Naruto grew up alone. This was not unusual for an orphan in Konoha. What was unusual was the quality of his solitude. It was absolute, perfect, and entirely voluntary. He didn't lock his door because no one would dare knock on it. He didn't avoid the villagers because they avoided him with a dedication that bordered on religious practice. After the alley incident, a quiet understanding spread through the civilian population like a disease. Don't get close. Don't throw things. Don't even look at him wrong. Not because they felt guilty. They didn't. Because the last 3 people who touched him ended up in the hospital, and the boy hadn't even tried. He grew up in the margins of Konoha, walking where he wanted, eating where he wanted, sitting on rooftops and watching the village below with an expression that wasn't quite contempt and wasn't quite boredom, more like a scientist observing bacteria through a microscope, mildly interested, fundamentally detached. He figured out early that his ability was not just defensive. He could control vectors, all vectors, the direction and magnitude of any physical quantity that made contact with his body or that he chose to manipulate through direct touch. Kinetic energy, momentum, heat transfer, air pressure, gravitational pull, electrical signals, chakra flow, sound waves, light refraction. He tested it quietly, the way a child tests a new toy. He jumped off a building and reversed the gravitational vector at the last second, landing softly on a cushion of manipulated air. He touched a river and reversed its current, watching the water flow uphill for 6 minutes until he got bored. He held a leaf and stripped it of all kinetic energy, freezing it in absolute stillness, suspended in space like a photograph. He was 6 when he realized he was untouchable. He was 7 when he realized he was the strongest person he'd ever met. He was 8 when he stopped caring about either of those things and started wondering what the point of strength was in a world full of people too weak to even make him flinch. His hair turned white that year, not gradually like aging. All at once, overnight, like his body had decided that maintaining pigment was an unnecessary calculation. The Hokage's medical team said it was a side effect of his brain running continuous vector computations. The metabolic cost was being offloaded to non-essential systems. His skin paled too, going from sun brown to something almost translucent like paper stretched over light. By the time he entered the academy at age 8, Naruto Uzumaki looked like a ghost. White hair, wild and uncombed. Skin so pale you could see the blue veins at his temples. Eyes that were a washed out, uninterested shade of blue-gray most of the time. But that turned sharp, narrow, and red when something caught his attention. Which was rare. He wore black. A black and white patterned shirt, loose pants, no forehead protector. His hands were always in his pockets. He walked with a slouch that said he didn't care about anything in the world. And the unsettling part was that he genuinely didn't. The academy was a joke. Naruto recognized this on the first day and never revised his opinion. Iruka Umino stood at the front of the classroom and said, "Welcome to your first step on the path to becoming shinobi of the hidden leaf." Naruto, sitting in the back row with his feet on the desk, muttered, "Congratulations. You're training children to die for a government that doesn't care about them." The classroom went dead silent. Iruka's eye twitched. "Excuse me? I said what I said." There was a beat. Then Kiba Inuzuka burst out laughing. Then Shikamaru Nara, who had been pretending to sleep, opened one eye and said, "He's not wrong." Iruka decided, wisely, to move on. Naruto didn't participate in taijutsu sparring because no one could hit him, and anyone who tried got hurt. He didn't practice ninjutsu because hand signs were irrelevant to his abilities. He didn't study genjutsu because manipulating the electrical vectors in his own brain made him immune to any illusion. His neural signals were under his direct control. He sat in the back. He passed every written test with a perfect score. His brain was a computational engine that solved problems the way other people breathed. He failed every practical exam on purpose because performing academy standard jutsu felt like being asked to light a match when he could detonate a sun. The teachers hated him. The students feared him, except for a few. Shikamaru Nara found him tolerable, mostly because Naruto was quiet and didn't make demands. They'd sit on the same rooftop sometimes, watching clouds. Naruto would manipulate the air currents to make the clouds form shapes. Shikamaru would point out which shapes looked like animals. Neither of them called it friendship, but it was the closest thing Naruto had to one. Hinata Hyuga watched him from a distance with an expression that was difficult to read. Not the fearful reverence most students showed. Something softer, something almost sad. One day she left a bento box on his desk and disappeared before he arrived. He ate it. It was good. He didn't thank her because he didn't know who left it. But a part of his calculation engine brain filed the gesture away in a category he didn't access often. Kindness directed at me, no apparent motive detected. Sasuke Uchiha stared at him with naked intensity from across the classroom, and Naruto stared back with the warmth of a dead light bulb. Sasuke was the class prodigy, the last Uchiha, the boy with tragedy written on him like a brand. He looked at Naruto and saw a rival. Naruto looked at Sasuke and saw a child playing pretend at darkness. "Stop staring at me," Naruto said one day without looking up from the desk. "You're not strong enough for me to care about." Sasuke's Sharingan almost awakened right there from sheer rage. Graduation day. Naruto failed. On purpose, obviously. He refused to perform the clone jutsu because, direct quote, "I'm not degrading myself by creating a fake version of me that's weaker than the real thing, and the real thing is already the ceiling of what this village can produce." Iruka sighed. Naruto walked out. He was sitting on the swing outside the academy, not because he was sad, he just liked the swing. When Mizuki approached, "Hey Naruto, I know a way you can still graduate." Naruto looked at Mizuki with the expression of someone watching a bug fly into a lamp. "You want me to steal the forbidden scroll?" Mizuki blinked. "How did you?" "Your heart rate elevated when you said graduate, your pupils dilated when you mentioned the scroll, and the micro tremors in your voice indicate deception. Also, you've been meeting with an outside contact every Thursday night near the eastern wall. I can hear conversations from 200 meters away by amplifying the sound vectors that reach my ears." Naruto tilted his head. "You're a traitor." Mizuki's face went white, then red. Then he made the second worst decision of his life, which was reaching for his weapon. The worst decision of his life came 30 minutes later, in the forest clearing where Naruto had in fact stolen the forbidden scroll. Not because Mizuki told him to, but because he wanted to read it. His computational brain absorbed and cataloged every jutsu in the scroll in 11 minutes. Shadow clones. Interesting. Actual physical duplicates, each with real mass and real vectors. The dead demon consuming seal. Crude but architecturally elegant. The Edo Tensei. Conceptually offensive but mathematically sound. He was sitting against a tree, already bored, when Mizuki arrived. Iruka was there too, having chased the scroll's trail. Both arrived at the same time. Classic setup. Mizuki stood in the trees, smiling like he'd already won. "Naruto, do you know why the village hates you?" "Because they're stupid," Naruto said flatly. Mizuki twitched. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. "Because 12 years ago, the nine-tailed fox that attacked the village was sealed inside you. You are the demon fox." He clearly expected horror. Tears, a breakdown. Naruto blinked. "I know." Dead silence. "You know?" "I've known since I was 7. The seal on my stomach is a modified 4-symbol seal with a secondary 8 trigrams overlay. I can feel the fox's chakra behind the barrier. I analyzed the seal structure years ago." He yawned. Actually yawned. "Did you think that was going to be some big revelation? I contain a biju." "So what?" The fox is sealed behind a barrier, and I have a barrier of my own that makes the seal look like a padlock on a submarine door. Next. Mizuki's hand trembled. His grand manipulation had collapsed in 15 seconds. You monster. Sure. Die, demon. Mizuki ripped the giant shuriken from his back. It was massive, 4 feet across, blades sharp enough to cut through tree trunks, spinning with the force of a chunin's full power throw. He launched it at point-blank range. 10 feet, no dodge time, no reaction time. A lethal hit on any genin in history. The shuriken crossed the distance in a heartbeat. It hit Naruto's forehead. Clang! The sound was wrong. It wasn't the sound of metal hitting flesh. It was the sound of a hammer striking a vault door, a bank vault, a tomb. Something so fundamentally immovable that the concept of penetration was a mathematical impossibility. The shuriken stopped, dead, hovering against Naruto's skin, still spinning but going nowhere, its rotational energy trapped in a closed vector loop. The forest went quiet. Even the insects stopped. Naruto tilted his head, 1 degree to the left. Slowly, like a predator examining something small. Return. 1 word. Flat. Bored. The shuriken reversed. Not just its direction, its magnitude. The rotational speed tripled. The kinetic energy amplified by a factor of 3. It left Naruto's forehead like a cannonball. Mizuki didn't have time to scream. The shuriken hit him in the center of his chest and kept going. It carved through him the way a saw cuts through wet wood, carrying his body 30 yards back into a tree trunk, where it embedded with a sound like a thunderclap. Mizuki hung there, pinned, eyes wide, mouth open, the life leaving him in a rush of crimson that painted the bark behind him, dead before the echo faded. Naruto looked at the corpse the way someone looks at a spilled drink. Mild inconvenience. Already forgotten. He yawned again. That was boring. Iruka stood 15 feet away. He hadn't moved, couldn't move. His legs were locked, his hands were shaking, and his mind was doing something it had never done before, rewriting everything he thought he knew about the boy in front of him. He'd prepared himself for the possibility that Naruto was dangerous. Every teacher had been briefed by the Hokage. Unusual abilities, handle with care. He'd expected something. Enhanced strength, maybe. Some manifestation of the fox's power. This wasn't that. This wasn't enhanced anything. This was a fundamental alteration of the laws of physics centered on a 12-year-old boy who looked like he'd rather be sleeping. Naruto. Iruka's voice cracked. He swallowed. Tried again. Naruto. What? What are you? Naruto stood up, brushed off his pants, picked up the forbidden scroll and tucked it under his arm like a newspaper. Passing, he said. Give me my headband. Iruka, operating on some autopilot of duty and shock, reached into his vest and held out a forehead protector. Naruto took it, looked at it, and tied it around his neck like a collar rather than wearing it on his forehead. Thanks, Sensei. He turned and walked away, paused, looked back over his shoulder with the faintest shadow of something that might have been respect. You were going to jump in front of that shuriken for me. I could read the tension vectors in your legs. You were going to sacrifice yourself. Iruka felt his throat tighten. Why? Naruto asked, genuine curiosity, like it was a math problem he couldn't solve. Because you're my student, Iruka said. Naruto stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something no one in the village had ever seen him do. He smiled, not the psychotic grin, not the dead-eyed smirk, an actual human, fleeting smile that was gone so fast you'd think you imagined it. Weird, he said, and left. The village heard about Mizuki by morning. The story spread through the shinobi ranks like fire through dry grass. A genin, a freshly graduated 12-year-old genin, had killed a chunin without moving from the spot he was standing in, had reflected a lethal weapon back at Triple Force without blinking. The thing they tried to break was unbreakable. It had always been unbreakable, and now it had a headband. Team assignments happened 3 days later. In canon, Naruto would have been placed on Team 7 with Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno under Kakashi Hatake. This is not canon. The third Hokage spent 2 sleepless nights staring at the team rosters. The problem was simple and unsolvable. No genin team could contain Naruto Uzumaki. Putting him with students of similar age was pointless. He operated on a level that made Jonin look pedestrian. Putting him with stronger teammates was dangerous, not for him, but for anyone who might accidentally trigger his reflection. In the end, Hiruzen made a decision based not on combat compatibility but on the only metric that might matter: who could reach the boy as a person. Team 7, Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, Shikamaru Nara. Jonin Sensei, Kakashi Hatake. The logic was cold and precise. Hinata was gentle enough to approach him without triggering aggression. Shikamaru was smart enough to communicate with him on an intellectual level. And Kakashi, the only Jonin with the Sharingan, the only one who might be able to analyze and understand Naruto's ability at a technical level, was the handler, not teacher. Hiruzen was honest with himself about the distinction. He's not a student, Hiruzen told Kakashi in a private meeting. He's a strategic asset with the emotional development of a feral cat. Your job is to keep him pointed at the enemy. Kakashi read the file, closed it, opened it again. He reflected a giant shuriken at triple velocity. Yes. Without hand signs. Yes. And you want me to teach him? I want you to survive being near him. Teaching is optional. Kakashi showed up 3 hours late to the team meeting because some things are constant across all realities. He found Shikamaru asleep on a desk, Hinata sitting quietly with her hands folded, and Naruto perched on the windowsill like a gargoyle, white hair catching the light, eyes half closed, radiating the energy of someone who was tolerating the existence of everyone in the room as a personal favor. Yo, Kakashi said, raising one hand. I'm your Jonin sensei. First impressions. Tell me your names, your likes, your dislikes, your dreams. Shikamaru groaned. Shikamaru Nara, I like clouds. I dislike effort. My dream is to do as little as possible. Hinata pressed her fingers together. Hinata Hyuga, I like pressing flowers. I dislike conflict. My dream is to become someone who can stand on her own. They looked at Naruto. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Naruto Uzumaki, I like silence. I dislike being touched. My dream is... He paused, looked out the window. I don't have one. Dreams require wanting something. I can't think of a single thing this world has that I can't already take. The room temperature seemed to drop 2 degrees. Kakashi's eyes smiled through what was clearly existential dread. Wonderful. We're going to be great friends. The bell test. Classic. 2 bells, 3 students. The lesson is teamwork. Kakashi held up the bells. You have until noon. Come at me with the intent to kill, or you won't have a chance. Shikamaru sighed. This is a teamwork exercise. The math doesn't work. 3 students, 2 bells. The point is to see if we cooperate. Kakashi blinked. Well, that was fast. Can we just skip to the part where you pass us? Shikamaru asked. I'd like to go back to sleep. That's not how this. Naruto appeared next to Kakashi. Not body flicker. Not speed. He had manipulated the air resistance around his body to 0 friction and the ground vectors to propel him forward. The result was movement so fast it didn't register as movement. More like teleportation with extra steps. He plucked both bells from Kakashi's belt. Kakashi's hand went to his hip. Empty. He looked at Naruto. Naruto was already walking back to Hinata, dangling the bells. Here. He tossed one to Hinata, tossed the other to Shikamaru. Teamwork demonstrated. Objective complete. Can I go home now? Kakashi stood very still for a moment. Then he lifted his headband, revealing the Sharingan in his left eye. He hadn't activated it for the test. He activated it now, not for combat, but because he needed to see. Needed to understand. What the Sharingan showed him was wrong. Naruto's body was surrounded by a field of energy that the Sharingan couldn't properly categorize. It wasn't chakra. It wasn't nature energy. It was more like a mathematical construct, a constantly shifting, infinitely complex lattice of vector calculations that analyzed, reflected, and redirected every physical force in real time. Thousands of calculations per second. Millions. More processing power than any brain should be able to handle. Kakashi closed the Sharingan, put his headband back down. You pass, he said quietly. Then to himself, God help us all. Their first missions were D rank, catching cats, pulling weeds, painting fences. Naruto caught the cat by reversing the vector of its movement. It ran at full speed in one direction and instantly found itself moving at the same speed in the opposite direction, directly into Hinata's waiting arms. Mission time, 43 seconds. He pulled weeds by touching the ground and manipulating the vectors of the root systems, causing every weed in a 200-meter radius to eject itself from the soil simultaneously. They rained down like confetti. Mission time, 12 seconds. He painted a fence by manipulating the surface tension and flow vectors of the paint itself, causing it to spread evenly across every surface without a brush. Mission time, 6 seconds. Kakashi watched this with the expression of a man who had just realized his job was obsolete. Shikamaru watched it with the expression of a man who had just realized he would never have to do physical labor again. Hinata watched it with the expression of a girl who was trying very hard not to be impressed and failing completely. "Can we get a real mission?" Naruto said after the 8th D rank in 2 weeks. His voice carried the tone of a university professor being asked to solve a kindergarten worksheet. Kakashi looked at the Hokage. The Hokage looked at the mission board. Then he looked back at Team 7 and made a decision that would reshape the trajectory of the entire land of waves. There is a C-rank escort mission available. The bridge builder Tazuna was drunk, loud, and unimpressed with his escorts. "These are kids. You're sending kids to protect me?" Naruto didn't look at him. "You're lying about the mission parameters. Your stress hormones are elevated beyond what a standard escort would cause. Your hands are shaking, not from alcohol. The tremor pattern is wrong. You're scared of something specific and you didn't tell the Hokage about it." Tazuna's face went white. "I don't know what. Continue lying if you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're afraid of isn't going to be a problem." They left the village gates. Naruto walked with his hands in his pockets. Hinata walked beside him, close but not too close, and Shikamaru trailed behind with his hands behind his head. Kakashi read his book. A casual observer would see 4 people on a stroll, not a shinobi team, heading into what would become the most one-sided engagement in the history of Wave Country. The Demon Brothers attacked 40 minutes outside the village. They burst from a puddle, Gozu and Meizu, shonen-level missing nin with poison-tipped chain gauntlets. Their chain wrapped around Kakashi and shredded him, or so it appeared. Substitution. But the Demon Brothers didn't know that. They turned toward the unprotected like Genin and charged. Meizu swung his chain at Naruto. The chain hit the vector field. The metal links shattered like they were made of glass. The fragments reversed into Meizu's body, 100 tiny projectiles moving at the exact speed they'd arrived at. He crumpled without a sound. Gozu watched his brother fall and did something genuinely brave and profoundly stupid. He kept coming. He lunged with his poison claws extended, aiming for Naruto's throat. Naruto caught his wrist. Not with effort, the way you'd catch a ball thrown by a toddler. Then he said casually, like he was ordering food, "Vector change, nervous system." Gozu screamed. Naruto had reversed the electrical signals in his arm, motor neurons firing in reverse, telling every muscle to contract inward instead of outward. The arm collapsed in on itself like a crushed can. Gozu hit the ground, arm twisted at an angle that shouldn't exist, unconscious from pain. Total combat time, 4 seconds. Hinata had activated her Byakugan and was in a defensive stance. Shikamaru had his shadow halfway extended. Neither of them had needed to do anything. Kakashi reappeared from behind a tree, Ika-Icha still in hand. He looked at the Chunin on the ground, one shred by his own chain fragments, one with an arm that would need to be amputated. Naruto. Try to leave some alive for interrogation next time. They are alive, technically. Tazuna stood frozen behind them, psyche bottles slipping from his fingers. He looked at the white-haired boy who hadn't removed his hands from his pockets for the second attack. He looked at the 2 professional killers crumpled on the road like discarded toys. What? What the hell is that kid? What the hell is that Kyon? That's Naruto. You get used to it. Sort of. Not really. Wave Country was dying. You could see it in the empty market stalls, and the hollow-eyed children, and the bridge that stretched halfway across the water like a broken promise. Gato had strangled the country's economy with the precision of a man who understood that you didn't need an army to conquer a nation. You just needed to control the money. Tazuna's house was modest and full of quiet grief. His daughter Tsunami served them food with trembling hands. His grandson Inari sat in the corner and stared at the wall with the eyes of a child who had already decided the world was cruel and resistance was futile. Heroes don't exist, Inari said at dinner. Everyone who fights back dies. The table went quiet. Naruto ate his rice in silence for a moment. Then he said, without looking up, "You're half right. Heroes don't exist. People who are strong enough to impose their will on reality exist. The difference is that heroes die for causes. Strong people don't die at all. Inari's eyes filled with angry tears. What would you know about suffering? You probably had everything handed to. Naruto's eyes shifted. The blue-gray bled to red. Not dramatically, not with visible chakra or killing intent. They just changed like a traffic light, and Inari choked on his own words. I grew up in a village that wanted me dead, Naruto said. His voice was flat. I've had rocks thrown at my head, poison put in my food, and my apartment set on fire twice. By the time I was 6, I'd seen more hatred aimed at me than this entire country has seen from Gado. The difference between us is that I stopped crying about it and started being the thing they were afraid of. He went back to eating. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Hinata, sitting beside him, did something quietly remarkable. She reached over and placed one small hand on his forearm, not pushing, not grabbing, just resting there, light enough that the vector field didn't even register it as a threat. It was the first time someone had touched Naruto Uzumaki in 7 years. He didn't pull away. He didn't look at her, but he didn't pull away. They knew Zabuza was coming. Kakashi had deduced it from the Demon Brothers' affiliation. Missing Nin from Kirigakure, former member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist, Demon of the Hidden Mist. A-rank threat. The morning on the bridge was thick with fog, unnaturally thick. Naruto felt it the moment they stepped onto the concrete. The water vapor density was being manipulated, concentrated, pushed into the area by an external chakra source. Hidden Mist Jutsu, Kakashi said, pulling up his headband. Everyone stay. I can see through it, Naruto said. Not with eyes. He could feel the vectors. Every water droplet in the fog was a point of data. Every displacement, every air current, every vibration told him exactly where everything was. The fog wasn't concealment to him, it was a map. There's 2 people on the bridge, south end. One large, carrying something heavy. One smaller, moving fast, flanking left. Kakashi stared at him. You can sense through the mist? I can sense through everything. Every particle in this fog is a vector. I'm reading all of them. Zabuza Momochi emerged from the mist like a nightmare taking physical form. Tall, broad, bandaged face, executioner's blade on his back, a massive cleaver of dark iron that weighed more than most men and had been designed to behead. He radiated killing intent the way a furnace radiated heat. Kakashi tensed. Hinata activated her Byakugan. Shikamaru assessed and immediately started calculating shadow angles. Naruto took one hand out of his pocket. You're the brats who took out the Demon Brothers? Zabuza's voice rumbled through the fog. The Hatake I expected, but a team of Genin? This'll be quick. Yes, Naruto agreed. It will. Zabuza moved. He was fast, A-rank speed, boosted by killing intent, decades of combat experience compressed into a single explosive action. He drew the executioner's blade in a horizontal arc aimed at Naruto's neck. The blade moved fast enough to create a visible pressure wake in the fog. Naruto didn't dodge, didn't move, didn't even change his expression. He tapped his foot on the ground. Vector change, ground. The concrete beneath Zabuza's feet exploded upward, not cracked, not displaced, exploded. Naruto had reversed the structural vectors of the bridge material, converting downward compressive force into upward kinetic energy. Stone spikes erupted like the fingers of a buried giant, and the bridge beneath Zabuza became a forest of jagged concrete pillars in the space between heartbeats. Zabuza dodged. He was an A-rank ninja, and his reflexes were real. He leaped backward, spun in midair, and converted his swing into a downward overhead chop aimed at Naruto's skull. Full power, every ounce of his massive frame behind a blade that had cut through iron. The executioner's blade hit Naruto's neck. Clang. The sound was hideous, like a church bell being struck by a wrecking ball. The blade stopped dead against his skin, and the recoil, the full reversed kinetic energy of Zabuza's strongest attack, traveled back through the metal, through the handle, through Zabuza's arms. Both of Zabuza's arms broke, not fractured. Broke. Compound fractures, both forearms, the bones snapping like dry branches. His hands spasmed open and the executioner's blade fell to the ground with a sound like a funeral bell. Zabuza stumbled back. His eyes, above the bandages, were wide. Not with pain. He was a hardened killer who had walked through pain his entire life. With incomprehension. His brain could not process what had just happened. He had hit the boy with the full power of one of the 7 swords, and the boy's neck had broken his arms. "You?" Zabuza's voice came out strangled. "What the hell are you?" Naruto looked at him. Actually looked. The red eyes focused, and for a moment, Zabuza saw something in them that he had only ever seen in the eyes of the Mizukage. An absolute, fundamental certainty that the person looking at you could end your existence and was choosing, moment by moment, not to. "You tried to cut a vector with a piece of iron," Naruto said. He sounded almost disappointed. How primitive. Behind him, Kakashi's Sharingan was spinning, recording everything, analyzing nothing because there was nothing to analyze. No jutsu, no chakra expenditure, just a boy standing still while an A-rank swordsman destroyed himself trying to touch him. "Kakashi-sensei," Shikamaru said quietly from behind his shadow, his voice containing the forced calm of someone watching a natural disaster. "What are we even here for?" Kakashi didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. Hinata's Byakugan was active, and she could see the vector field around Naruto. A shimmering lattice of redirected forces, invisible to the normal eye, but visible to hers as a distortion in the ambient chakra. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Like looking at the eye of a hurricane and realizing the calm wasn't peace. It was the absence of resistance. Zabuza tried to form a hand sign, one-handed seal, water dragon jutsu. Even with broken arms, he was a veteran. The water behind the bridge surged upward, forming into a massive serpentine dragon that roared toward Naruto with enough force to demolish a building. Naruto raised his hand. Fingers spread. Vector change. Redirect. The water dragon split apart, not destroyed, redirected. Every molecule of water in its structure had its directional vector reversed and recalculated. The dragon unraveled into 1,000 streams that curved around Naruto like a river around a stone and reformed behind him, aimed back at Zabuza with double the force. Zabuza took his own jutsu to the chest. The water hit him like a battering ram, launching him 20 feet backward into a support pillar. The pillar cracked. Zabuza slid down it, broken arms hanging limp, coughing blood. "Stay down," Naruto said. Not a request, a flicker of movement. Senbon needles from the flanking position. Naruto didn't turn around. Your partner should reveal herself. Those needles are going to reflect, and I'm not going to aim them somewhere non-lethal. A figure dropped from the mist. Haku, the porcelain mask, the hunter nin disguise, the gentle eyes behind the mask that held a devotion so complete it was almost religious. "Please," Haku said softly, "allow me to take Zabuza-sama and leave. He cannot fight any longer." Naruto looked at the broken swordsman, then at the masked figure. Then he turned around and walked back toward his team. "Take him." Kakashi stepped forward. "Naruto, we can't just..." "He's done. His arms are shattered, his jutsu was reflected, and his partner is a medical specialist who's going to spend the next week trying to put him back together. They'll come back when he's healed. And when they do, I'll break him again. It doesn't matter." He kept walking. "Let's go." Kakashi looked at the retreating form of Haku carrying Zabuza's broken body into the mist. He looked at his student. He felt something he hadn't felt since Obito died. The nauseating certainty that he was watching something unfold that he couldn't control and couldn't predict. Tazuna stood at the far end of the bridge, hands gripping the railing, knuckles white. He looked at Naruto's retreating back and said, to no one in particular, "That's not a ninja, that's a weapon of mass destruction with legs." Zabuza came back. Of course he did. Pride demanded it, loyalty demanded it, and Gato's money demanded it. 1 week later, the bridge again. But this time Haku didn't flank. This time Haku stepped forward. "I will fight," Haku said, removing the mask. A beautiful face, gentle, sad, the face of someone who had been born with a gift the world a curse. "For Zabuza-sama, I will become a true weapon." Secret jutsu, crystal ice mirrors. The air temperature plummeted. Ice formed from nothing. Massive, crystalline mirrors that surrounded Naruto in a dome of frozen reflective surfaces. 21 mirrors. Each one a portal for Haku's speed technique. Each one a launch pad for attacks from every angle. Haku flickered into the mirrors, became a blur, became 21 blurs, and then the needles came. 1,000 senbon, simultaneously, from every direction, every angle calculated, every trajectory lethal, every needle aimed at a vital point. The attack was beautiful in its precision. A web of death so dense that escape was mathematically impossible for anyone else. Naruto sighed. Reflect. One word. Flat. Exhausted, every needle stopped. 1,000 Senbon, frozen in space around his body like a constellation of steel. The vector field didn't just stop them, it held them, calculated their return trajectories in a fraction of a second, and released them. 1,000 needles reversed 180 degrees. They went back into the mirrors. Haku screamed. 21 mirrors meant the needles distributed across every reflection point. The Senbon perforated the ice, shattered several mirrors, and caught Haku in the arms, the legs, the torso, struck by the same weapons aimed with the same precision, only now they were faster. But Naruto wasn't done. He kicked the air. It wasn't a dramatic motion, a short, sharp movement, like kicking a ball. But what he actually did was compress the air in front of his foot into a hyper-dense pocket of kinetic energy, an air cannon with the force of a small bomb. Vector storm pressure cannon. Boom. The compressed air detonated outward. Every remaining mirror shattered simultaneously. The explosion of ice and force was so violent it cleared the fog from the entire bridge in one pulse. Haku was blasted out of the mirror dimension and sent tumbling across the concrete, trailing blood and ice crystals, unconscious before the sound finished echoing. Every mirror, gone. One kick. Sasuke would have been in this fight in canon, would have nearly died in the ice mirrors, would have awakened his Sharingan. But Sasuke wasn't here, and Naruto hadn't taken a single step. Hinata stared. Her Byakugan was active and she had tracked every needle, watched them stop, reverse, and return with a precision that bordered on omniscient. She understood, on a level she couldn't articulate, that Naruto hadn't just blocked the attack. He had solved it, like an equation. The entire technique, Haku's speed, the mirror angles, the needle trajectories, was a math problem, and Naruto's brain had returned the answer in less than a second. That was, she whispered. Troublesome, Shikamaru finished. He'd given up trying to analyze Naruto's fights. The IQ required to understand what was happening exceeded his own, and he'd been told his was over 200. Zabuza stood at the far end of the bridge, arms still bandaged, staring at the boy who had just dismantled his strongest weapon in the time it took to exhale. Who trained you? Zabuza asked. His voice was hollow. No one, Naruto said. Training implies I needed improvement. Zabuza laughed. It was broken and bitter and real. You know what? I believe you. Then Gato arrived with his mercenaries. 100 of them, armed with swords and clubs and the smug confidence of men who believed numbers meant victory. Well, well, Gato said, stepping onto the bridge in his tiny suit, adjusting his tiny glasses. It seems like the ninja have worn each other out. Boys, kill them all, and bring me the bridge builder's head. 100 mercenaries surged forward. Naruto looked at them. The red eyes were fully active now. Not because the mercenaries were dangerous, they weren't, but because he was annoyed. He'd been trying to wrap this up and go home, and now 100 thugs were between him and a bowl of ramen. He raised one hand. Vector change. Atmosphere. He rotated his hand in a slow circle. Above the bridge, the air began to move. Not wind, not a breeze. A controlled manipulation of every atmospheric vector within a 100-meter radius. Air pressure dropped. Temperature plummeted. Wind speeds accelerated from 0 to hurricane force in 3 seconds, forming a localized cyclone center directly above the mercenary army. The tornado touched down on the bridge. Mercenaries flew. Swords flew. Gato flew. They were picked up and flung off the bridge like insects caught in a jet engine, scattered across the ocean below in a screaming, flailing mass. Not dead. Naruto had calibrated the wind speeds precisely. Broken bones. Shattered egos. But alive. Mostly Gato landed in the water 200 meters from the bridge, screaming and flailing in his expensive suit, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of his entire private army. Naruto lowered his hand. The tornado dissipated. The air stilled. I'm hungry, he said. Is there a ramen shop in this country? The silence on the bridge lasted 11 seconds. Then Tazuna started laughing. Deep, wheezing, disbelieving laughter that turned into tears. Behind him, the workers emerged from hiding. Inari stood at the bridge's entrance, watching the white-haired boy who had just thrown 100 men off a bridge with a wave of his hand. You. Inari's eyes were wide. You saved us. I was annoyed, Naruto corrected. Your country being saved was a side effect. But Inari was already running toward him, arms outstretched, tears streaming. He crashed into Naruto's legs and hugged him with the desperate force of a child who had just decided to believe in something again. The vector field didn't activate. Naruto's body classified the contact as non-threatening. A child's hug, zero harmful intent. The math said it was safe. Naruto stood there, hands in his pockets, a small child clinging to his legs, and he looked down with an expression that no one, not Kakashi, not Hinata, not Shikamaru, had ever seen on his face. Confusion. Genuine confusion. Because someone was holding on to him and his body wasn't pushing them away, and he didn't know what to do with that information. Weird, he muttered. Hinata smiled. Zabuza, sitting against a pillar with his broken arms and his unconscious student and his shattered worldview, watched the scene and said, "Hatake, that kid is going to rule the world someday, and I honestly can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing." Kakashi didn't answer, because he honestly couldn't tell either. They named the bridge after him, the Great Naruto Bridge. "Change the name," Naruto said. "What do you want us to call it?" "I don't care, just not after me. Bridges are things people walk on. Name it after the old man, he built it." The Great Tazuna Bridge didn't have the same ring to it, but Tazuna cried for 20 minutes straight, so they kept it. On the way home, walking through the forests of Fire Country, Hinata fell into step beside Naruto. The silence between them was comfortable in a way that defied Naruto's usual relationship with silence, which was that he tolerated it because it was better than listening to people talk. "Naruto-kun?" Hinata said softly. "What?" "That boy, Inari, when he hugged you, you look surprised." "I was recalculating. Physical contact without hostile intent is unusual enough that my passive reflection needed to verify it wasn't a threat." "Have you never been hugged before?" Silence. A long one, the kind that says more than words. The vector field activates based on intent. Hostile intent triggers reflection. Neutral or positive intent is allowed through. He paused. "There has never been positive intent directed at me through physical contact before." Hinata's heart broke and rebuilt itself in the span of that sentence. "May I?" She started, then stopped, her face turning pink in a way that would have made Kiba laugh and Shikamaru sigh. "May you what?" "May I hold your hand?" Naruto looked at her, red fading to blue eyes meeting pale lavender. He ran the calculation. Hinata Hyuga. 0 hostile vectors, heart rate elevated but consistent with emotional rather than combative arousal. Micro-expressions indicate sincerity. Probability of threat, 0. He took his hand out of his pocket and held it at his side, not reaching for her, just making it available. She took it, gently. Her fingers were warm and small, and the vector field let them through without a tremor. They walked like that for 3 miles. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them needed to. Behind them, Shikamaru glanced at Kakashi. "Are we supposed to pretend we don't see that?" he whispered. Kakashi, I smiled. "See what?" "I was reading." The Chunin exams arrived in Konoha like a storm front. Foreign ninja pouring through the gates, the civilian population buzzing with excitement, the Hokage's office drowning in paperwork. The exam was a proving ground, a political tool, and a spectacle all wrapped into one. It was also, as Naruto would later describe it, the most boring waste of time in human history, with 2 exceptions. The first exception was the Forest of Death. The second was Neji Hyuga. But first, the written exam. Ibiki Morino stood at the front of the examination room, scarred face set in stone, and delivered his speech about the rules. 10 questions. Cheat without getting caught. The 10th question is a trap. Naruto didn't cheat. He answered all 9 questions correctly in 4 minutes because they were math and spatial reasoning problems, and his brain solved them the way a calculator solves addition. Instantly, perfectly, with 0 doubt. When Ibiki revealed the 10th question, accept the risk of staying or quit forever, Naruto didn't even look up. He was already asleep. Hands behind his head, feet on the desk like breathing softly, Hinata gently nudged him awake when it was over. "Did we pass?" he mumbled. "Yes." "Great. Wake me up when something interesting happens." The second exam proctor, Anko Mitarashi, crashed through the window on a banner and launched into her speech about the Forest of Death. She was loud, aggressive, and clearly compensating for something with an excessive amount of dramatic flair. "Half of you won't make it out alive," she declared with manic glee. Naruto opened one eye. Your predictions are mathematically improbable given the controlled environment and the political consequences of excessive genin fatalities during an international event. Anko blinked. What? He said you're being dramatic, Shikamaru translated. I know what he said. The Forest of Death. 44 training grounds. A contained wilderness of oversized flora, dangerous fauna, and the kind of atmosphere that made genin question their career choices. Team 7 entered through Gate 12. Their objective, obtain both a Heaven and Earth scroll, then reach the tower in the center within 5 days. They had both scrolls in 3 hours. The first team to engage them was a Rain Village squad. 3 genin, competent, coordinated, and completely unprepared for what they were facing. Their leader threw a volley of kunai. The kunai reflected back. Their second member launched a water jutsu. Naruto redirected it into their third member. The fight lasted 9 seconds. Naruto took their scroll and left them unconscious, but alive. Hinata treated their wounds with basic first aid because she was a fundamentally decent person. Shikamaru stood watch and contemplated the sheer improbability of his team assignment. They were en route to the tower when the air changed. Naruto stopped walking. His eyes went red. Full red, bright as arterial blood, the pupils narrowing to slits. His hands came out of his pockets. Both hands. Shikamaru had never seen Naruto take both hands out of his pockets. His blood went cold. Run, Naruto said. What? Hinata asked. Both of you, run, now. Get to the tower. Naruto-kun, what? There's something in this forest that's not supposed to be here. The vector readings are wrong. The air itself is being displaced by something massive, something with a chakra signature that makes the Nine Tails feel like a candle next to a bonfire. It's coming this way and you need to not be here. Shikamaru grabbed Hinata's arm. Move, now. He's not joking. They ran. 60 seconds later, Orochimaru descended from the canopy like a snake falling from a branch. He was smiling. That wide, predatory, inhuman smile that had haunted 3 generations of shinobi. My, Orochimaru said. What an interesting specimen you are. I came to this forest looking for the last Uchiha, but the Uchiha isn't on this team, is he? Instead, I find you, the boy with the untouchable skin. His tongue, impossibly long, slid across his lips. I've heard the reports. Vector manipulation, they call it. I simply had to see it for myself. Naruto stood in the clearing. The trees around him creaked in the wind. His white hair caught the dappled light. His red eyes were fixed on Orochimaru with the flat, analytical stare of a calculator processing an equation. Orochimaru, S-rank missing nin, former student of the 3rd Hokage, expert in forbidden jutsu, body modification, and immortality techniques, wanted in all 5 nations. He paused. You're the most dangerous thing I've encountered so far. Orochimaru's smile widened. I'm flattered. Don't be. It's a statement of fact, not admiration. The bar was low. The smile flickered. Just slightly enough. Wind style, great breakthrough. Orochimaru opened his mouth and the forest bent. A wall of compressed air roared toward Naruto. A jutsu powerful enough to flatten buildings, launched by one of the most powerful shinobi alive. Trees snapped. The ground tore. Everything in its path was obliterated. Naruto raised one hand. The wind hit his palm and stopped. Not deflected. Stopped. His vector field seized the entire kinetic structure of the technique, analyzed its velocity, direction, mass, and energy, and held it. Then he compressed it, his fingers closed. The captured wind, a wall of force that could level a city block, compressed into a sphere the size of a baseball. The air inside superheated from compression. The same principle that made diesel engines ignite fuel, scaled to the level of a jutsu. The sphere in Naruto's hand glowed white hot. Plasma, a tiny star, plasma cannon. He threw it. The ball of superheated compressed air crossed the distance to Orochimaru in an instant. When it detonated, the forest burned. Not just burned. A straight line of destruction carved through the trees for a mile. Incineration. The bark, the leaves, the ground itself turned to glass and ash in a corridor of absolute thermal destruction. Orochimaru's skin was peeling. His left arm was gone. The clone he'd substituted with had only partially absorbed the impact. He reformed from a mass of snakes 30 meters to the left, eyes wide, smile gone. Orochimaru was not smiling. Impossible, he whispered. You captured an A-rank wind technique and converted it into plasma. The calculations required, the thermodynamics alone, no human brain should be capable of. "Your mistake," Naruto said, walking forward through the burning forest, flames parting around his body because he was redirecting the thermal vectors away from his skin, "is assuming I'm bound by what a human brain should be capable of." Orochimaru reassessed, rapidly. He was a genius, the greatest scientific mind in shinobi history, and he reassessed the way a genius does. Completely, instantly, without ego. This boy was not a target. This boy was a threat. "I've changed my plans," Orochimaru said, his voice shifting from curious to tactical. "I don't need to test you, I need to mark you. The curse seal will." He moved. S-rank speed, body flickering across the gap in a blur that most Sharingan couldn't track. His neck extended, that grotesque serpentine extension, mouth open, fangs bared, aiming for the junction between Naruto's neck and shoulder. The bite connected. Orochimaru's fangs hit Naruto's skin and broke. 2 fangs, snapped at the root. The vector field reflected the penetrative force back through the teeth, shattering them like glass against concrete. Orochimaru recoiled, blood spraying from his own mouth, his cursed fangs destroyed on contact with the one surface in the world they couldn't pierce. Naruto caught his face, one hand. Fingers spread across Orochimaru's forehead, cheeks and jaw, a grip that almost gentle. Bioelectricity manipulation. Naruto rewrote the electrical signals in Orochimaru's nervous system. Not damaged, rewrote. Motor neurons fired in random patterns. Pain receptors activated across every nerve cluster simultaneously. The signal pathways between brain and body scrambled like a radio tuned to every frequency at once. Orochimaru seized. The legendary Sannin, the man who had defected from Konoha, who had experimented on hundreds of subjects, who had killed Kazekages and fought Hokages, who had never run from anything in his life, collapsed to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. His body convulsed. His hands clawed at the dirt. His mouth opened in a silent scream as his own nervous system turned against him. Naruto held the grip for 3 seconds. Then he let go. "Leave," he said. "Before I stop being gentle." Orochimaru pulled himself to his feet. It took 30 seconds. His body was still twitching, residual electrical chaos rippling through his muscles. He looked at Naruto with an expression the Sannin had never worn before, fear. Real fear, not the calculated caution of a predator encountering a rival. Genuine, animal, primal fear, the kind that says this thing can kill me, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. "What are you?" Orochimaru asked. The question was almost reverent. "Bored," Naruto said. "Get out of my forest." Orochimaru ran. He melted into the ground like water into sand. His body replacement technique carrying him away from the clearing at maximum speed, his mind already racing to process what he had just experienced. The curse seal was irrelevant. The Uchiha was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was that there was a 12-year-old boy in the forest of death who had reflected his jutsu, broken his fangs, hijacked his nervous system, and dismissed him like a nuisance. For the first time in his life, Orochimaru left a fight he had started. Naruto stood alone in the burning clearing. The flames died around him as he stopped redirecting them and simply negated their thermal vectors. He was breathing normally, heart rate normal, no injuries, no chakra expenditure worth measuring. He put his hands back in his pockets and walked toward the tower. Hinata and Shikamaru were waiting at the tower when he arrived. "What happened?" Hinata asked, her Byakugan still active, scanning him for injuries she wouldn't find. "An S-rank missing nin tried to bite me. And his teeth broke." Shikamaru sat down heavily. "I need a career change." They opened their scrolls. Iruka appeared in a puff of smoke, beaming, ready to congratulate them on passing the second exam. He looked at Naruto. Naruto's clothes were slightly singed. There was a faint smell of ozone around him. His eyes were still red. "Naruto, is everything okay?" "I set a mile of forest on fire." Iruka's smile froze. "You, what?" "It's fine. The fire's out." "How is that fine?" Naruto walked past him. "Relax, sensei. The trees will grow back. Orochimaru's teeth won't." Iruka turned to Kakashi, who had appeared via Shunshin, looking mildly disheveled. "Did he just say Orochimaru?" Kakashi's visible eye was very, very tired. "I need to report to the Hokage." The preliminary rounds took place in the tower's underground arena. Too many teams had passed, so one-on-one fights within the herd. The matchboard spun. First match, Sasuke Uchiha versus Yoroi Akado. Sasuke won, barely, struggling against a chakra-draining technique without the curse mark he never received in this timeline. He looked furious and hollow. He kept glancing at Naruto in the stands. Second match, Shikamaru Nara versus Ken Tsuchi. Shikamaru won with his shadow in 45 seconds, then immediately went back to sleep. Third match, Hinata Hyuga versus Kiba Inuzuka. Hinata won. Not easily. Kiba was aggressive, fast, and his fang over fang technique was devastating. But Hinata had spent weeks training alongside Naruto, watching him analyze vectors, listening to him describe the mathematics of force and motion. She couldn't manipulate vectors, but she could read them. She dodged fang over fang by a margin of 3 centimeters and hit Kiba with a gentle fist strike to the solar plexus that dropped him like a stone. In the stands, Naruto nodded. Once, Hinata's face turned so red that Shikamaru genuinely checked if she was having a medical emergency. Other matches happened. Gaara crushed Lee's arm and leg with his sand, a display of brutality that silenced the arena. Tamari blew Tenten away. Shino defeated his opponent with bugs. The usual. Then the board spun to Naruto's name. Naruto Uzumaki versus Kabuto Yakushi. Kabuto pushed up his glasses, smiled that mild, harmless smile. I forfeit. The arena went silent. What? The proctor asked. I said I forfeit. I have no interest in fighting that particular opponent. Kabuto's smile didn't change, but his eyes, behind the glasses, were calculating something complex. Some fights aren't worth having. He turned and walked up the stairs without another word. In the stands, Orochimaru's disguised form watched with narrowed eyes. Kabuto had made the right call. Engaging Naruto in a public arena would have accomplished nothing except exposing Kabuto's true abilities and getting him hospitalized. Naruto didn't even stand up. Smart, he said to no one. He advanced to the finals by default. 1 month. That was the gap between the preliminaries and the finals. 1 month to train, prepare, and strategize. Kakashi offered to train Naruto. In what? Naruto asked. I'll work with Hinata. He worked with Hinata. He taught her the principles of elemental manipulation, refined her gentle fist, and most importantly, helped her develop confidence that wasn't dependent on Naruto's presence. She was talented, genuinely talented. She just needed someone to tell her that. Shikamaru trained with his father, Shikaku, who told him, "Your teammate is the most dangerous genin in the history of the village. Your job isn't to match him. Your job is to be useful in the spaces he doesn't cover." What spaces? He covers everything. Emotional spaces, son. The boy's brilliant, but he's got the emotional intelligence of a rock. That's where you and the Hyuga girl come in. Shikamaru thought about this. That's surprisingly deep, Dad. I have my moments. Naruto spent the month doing something no one expected, reading. He went to the Konoha Public Library every day and read everything. History, chakra theory, sealing arts, political science, geography. He read the biographies of every Hokage. He read the classified section by manipulating the lock vectors on the restricted shelves because security meant nothing to someone who could control physical reality. He read about the Uzumaki clan, his clan, a family of sealing masters destroyed by a coalition of nations who feared their power. An entire island of people wiped out because they were too dangerous to exist. He sat in the library after reading that file and was quiet for a long time. Then he went to the Hokage's office. "You knew," he said to the third Hokage. No preamble, no greeting. Just a flat statement aimed like a weapon. Hiruzen looked old. "I knew. My mother was Kushina Uzumaki, former Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. My father was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, the man who sealed the fox inside me." "Yes." "You hid this from me, to protect you. Your father had enemies. My father is dead. My mother is dead. My clan is dead. The only thing hiding their identities accomplished was ensuring I grew up without context for why the world wanted me gone." Naruto's eyes were red. Not angry red, cold red. The calculation kind. "You made me an orphan twice. Once by circumstance, once by choice." Hiruzen had no response that wasn't an excuse. So he said nothing. Naruto turned and left. At the door he paused. "I'm going to become Hokage." It was the first time he'd ever said those words. Not because he'd always wanted it, he hadn't, but because he'd spent a month reading about the failures of leadership that had led to every war, every atrocity, every pointless death in shinobi history, and he'd done the math. The system was broken. The math didn't work. And the only way to fix a broken equation was to take control of the variables. "I'm going to become Hokage," he repeated. because no one else in this village is smart enough to do it right. Hiruzen watched him go. Then he sat back in his chair and for the first time in decades, felt something he hadn't experienced since the Second Great Ninja War: hope. Terrifying, complicated, absolutely irrational hope. The Chunin exam finals. The stadium was packed. Daimyo, diplomats, shinobi from every nation, civilians crammed into every available seat. The air crackled with anticipation and the political tension of 5 nations pretending to be civil while their children tried to kill each other. First match, Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Hyuga. The crowd murmured. The Hyuga prodigy, the genius of the branch house, against the white-haired unknown. Most of the audience didn't know what Naruto could do. The shinobi in attendance who had read the reports felt varying degrees of sympathy for Neji. Neji descended into the arena with the fluid grace of a Hyuga master. Byakugan active, stance perfect, face set with the cold certainty of a man who believed in fate the way others believed in gravity. You cannot escape your destiny, Neji said. A failure will always be a failure. It is decided at birth. Naruto walked into the arena with his hands in his pockets. Are you done talking? He asked. Your chakra network is unusual. Neji's Byakugan narrowed. But it doesn't matter. The gentle fist targets Tenketsu. No matter what trick you're using, I will shut down your chakra and end this. Try. Neji moved. He was fast, genuinely fast. Hyuga training combined with natural talent and years of bitter, obsessive practice. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat, fingers extended, targeting the Tenketsu in Naruto's chest. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. 2 palms. His fingers struck Naruto's chest. They broke. Both index fingers snapped backward at the knuckle. The vector field reflected the kinetic energy of the strike back through Neji's own bones. He didn't even register the pain before the next strike was already launching. 4 palms. 2 more fingers broke. 8 palms. His right hand was a ruined mess of dislocated and fractured joints. 16 palms. He switched to his left hand. Those fingers broke too. 32 palms. He was striking with broken hands, blood spraying from split skin, every impact shattering another bone as the reflected force turned each precise gentle fist technique into a self-inflicted wound. 64 palms. Both hands were destroyed. Every finger on both hands was broken, dislocated, or fractured. His wrists were cracked. Blood dripped from his palms onto the arena floor. Neji stumbled back. His eyes were wide. Not with pain. Neji Hyuga could endure pain that would break most jonin. With disbelief. Absolute, total, reality-shattering disbelief. He had just executed the most advanced close combat technique in the Hyuga arsenal. Perfectly. At full speed, landing every single strike. And the only person who was injured was himself. Naruto hadn't moved. He laughed. That dry, scratching, psychotic laugh. The one that sounded like sandpaper being dragged across glass. The one that said he was genuinely amused, which was rare, and that the person who amused him should be very, very concerned about what came next. You're trying to inject chakra into me? Naruto said, still laughing. You're trying to shut down my Tenketsu by pushing chakra through my network? He shook his head. I control the flow, every vector, every direction. The chakra in your gentle fist hit my skin and I told it to go back to you. Your own chakra just struck your own fingers 64 times. The arena was silent. 8,000 people. Silent. In the Hyuga section, Hiashi stared. His Byakugan was active, and he had tracked every exchange, every reflected chakra point, every broken bone. He had watched the 64 palms. The pinnacle of his clan's martial art, the technique he had spent decades perfecting and decades more teaching, be rendered not just ineffective, but self-destructive by a boy who treated it like a math problem. Father? Hanabi, his younger daughter, tugged his sleeve. Why is Neji-Nisan's hands all bloody? Hiashi didn't answer. Couldn't answer. His mouth was a thin line, and his hands were gripping his knees so hard the fabric was tearing. In the stands, Hinata watched with her Byakugan and felt something she'd never felt before. Validation. Not for herself, for every branch house member, for every person the Hyuga clan had told that their fate was sealed. Because down in that arena, the concept of fate was being beaten to death by basic physics. Rotation! Neji screamed. Desperation now, his voice cracking, his broken hands somehow forming the technique through sheer willpower. The Hyuga clan's absolute defense, a dome of spinning chakra that repelled all attacks. Neji spun. The chakra dome formed around him, a whirling sphere of blue energy that hummed with power. It was beautiful. It was perfect. Naruto walked up to it and touched it with one hand. Reverse. The rotation inverted. Not gradually. Not partially. Instantly and completely. Every vector of the spinning chakra reversed direction. A technique designed to push everything away suddenly pulled everything in, including Neji himself. The backlash was immediate and catastrophic. The inverted rotation crushed inward, the centripetal force compressing instead of expanding, and Neji was caught in the center of his own defense as it collapsed on him. The explosion of released energy launched Neji across the arena. He hit the far wall with a sound like a car crash. The concrete cracked. He slid down and didn't move. Naruto stood in the center of the arena, hands in his pockets. Not a scratch, not a mark, not even breathing hard. Fate, he said, loud enough for the entire stadium to hear. The only fate here is the direction I choose for you. The proctor checked Neji, unconscious, alive. Multiple fractures in both hands, wrists, and 3 ribs. The proctor raised his hand. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. The stadium erupted, not in cheers, not in boos, in noise. Raw, unprocessed, cacophonous noise. 8,000 people trying to express shock, awe, confusion, fear, and excitement simultaneously. The sound hit Naruto's vector field and he attenuated it to a comfortable level because he could do that. In the Kage box, the third Hokage sat very still. Beside him, the Kazekage, Orochimaru in disguise, sat equally still, but for entirely different reasons. Hiruzen was watching a boy he'd raised become something unprecedented. Orochimaru was watching a boy who had broken his teeth and hijacked his nervous system receive a standing ovation. Quite the student you have there, Hokage Dono, Orochimaru said, his disguised voice pleasant and mild. He's not a student, Hiruzen said quietly. He's the future. In the stands, reactions cascaded. Sakura Haruno, who in this timeline barely knew Naruto, turned to Ino and said, "What? What was that?" Ino had no words. For possibly the first time in her life, Rock Lee, in his wheelchair with his crushed limbs, watched with tears in his eyes. Not sadness, joy, absolute burning joy. That is what it means to defy fate. Guy-sensei, are you watching? Guy was watching. He was also crying. The flames of youth burned bright in that boy. Kakashi stood against the wall of the competitor's box, arms crossed, and for the first time in years, his visible eye wasn't lazy or bored or distant. It was sharp, focused, calculating. Not because he feared Naruto, but because he was beginning to understand what Naruto could become, not just as a weapon, but as a leader, as a force that could reshape the shinobi world. Sensei, Kakashi murmured, too quiet for anyone to hear, speaking to a dead man who had sealed the world's salvation inside the world's most dangerous boy. What did you create? The invasion began during the next match. Feathers drifted from the sky, the genjutsu of the large-scale technique. Civilians slumped in their seats. Genin fought to stay conscious. The sound and sand forces surged over Konoha's walls. The Kazekage revealed himself as Orochimaru, trapping the third Hokage in a barrier on the rooftop of the Kage box. War in an instant. Naruto was still in the arena when the first enemy shinobi dropped into the stadium. Sound ninja, 20 of them, armed, coordinated, targeting the unconscious civilians in the stands. He didn't wait for orders, didn't look for Kakashi, didn't hesitate. Vector storm. He jumped, straight up, 100 feet, propelled by manipulating the ground's reactive force, and at the apex, he rotated in the air and compressed the atmosphere below him into a spherical shockwave. The air detonated outward from his position like a bomb going off. The 20 sound ninja in the stadium were blown off their feet, slammed into walls, thrown out of the arena entirely. The unconscious civilians, protected by the directional specificity of Naruto's vectors, didn't even feel a breeze. He landed in the stands. Hinata was already there, Byakugan active, providing real-time positional data. Shikamaru was coordinating with nearby Chunin, his tactical mind turning chaos into structure. South Wall, 30 hostiles, Chunin-level, Hinata reported. East Gate, a summoning, something large, breaking through the barrier. Shikamaru, Naruto said. I know, evacuation routes are being established through the underground tunnels. Hinata, guide civilians. I'll coordinate defense with the Chunin. He looked at Naruto. What are you going to do? Win. He left. moving through the village at impossible speed, zero air resistance, maximum ground propulsion, each step covering 50 meters. He hit pockets of invasion forces like a natural disaster. Sound ninja at the market district, he reversed the vectors of their own explosive tags, detonating them in their hands. Sand ninja at the academy, he manipulated the ground beneath their feet, opening a 10-foot deep trench that swallowed an entire squad. A giant snake summoned crashing through the eastern wall. He touched it, one hand on its scales. Vector change, kinetic energy, 0. He removed all kinetic energy from the snake's body. Every atom of momentum, gone. The snake, 100 feet of muscle and scale moving at 30 miles per hour, stopped. Instantly. The whiplash of sudden zero velocity ruptured every blood vessel in its body simultaneously. It collapsed dead, a mountain of still flesh in the middle of the street, and Naruto stepped off its head and kept walking. The invasion lasted 45 minutes. Naruto ended most of it in 20. On the rooftop, the third Hokage fought Orochimaru inside the barrier. The Reaper Death Seal was forming, the old man's final technique, the one that would cost him his soul to take Orochimaru with him. Naruto arrived at the barrier. The Sound Force stood at its corners, maintaining the purple walls of energy. 4 elite ninja, each a master of their cursed seal transformations, channeling everything they had into an impenetrable barrier. Naruto touched the barrier. "Your barrier is a vector construct," he said, analyzing the energy flow with his computational mind. 4-point matrix, chakra flow clockwise, maintained by external sources at each vertex. The vectors rotate to create a self-sustaining loop that rejects external force. He placed both hands on the barrier's surface. "The flaw is obvious. You designed it to reject force applied inward. You didn't account for someone who can reverse the flow itself." Vector manipulation, barrier inversion. He didn't attack the barrier. He reached into its energy structure and reversed the directional flow of chakra at one of the 4 nodes. Clockwise became counterclockwise at a single point while the other 3 remained unchanged. The conflicting flows created a cascading failure, like reversing one gear in a machine and watching the entire mechanism tear itself apart. The barrier shattered. The Sound Force screamed as the backlash hit them. Jirobo collapsed. Kidomaru's web arms went limp. Tayuya's flute cracked. Sakon split into his component selves and both hit the ground. Naruto stepped through the gap. Inside, the third Hokage had the Reaper Death Seal half-formed. His soul was being pulled. The Shinigami loomed behind him. Orochimaru's arms were being consumed, but so was Hiruzen's life force. Naruto grabbed the old man's hand. Vector change, soul energy, halt. Could he manipulate the vector of a soul? Technically, everything was a vector. Movement, energy, force, even the metaphysical transfer of the Reaper Death Seal was, at its core, a directional flow of energy from one point to another. The soul pull stopped. Orochimaru's eyes went wide. "Impossible," Naruto looked at him. "You're out of teeth, out of techniques, and out of time. Leave." Orochimaru looked at his arms, half consumed by the seal, the flesh gray and dead, the chakra pathways severed. He looked at the boy who had shattered his barrier, halted a divine jutsu through pure vector manipulation, and was staring at him with the absolute certainty of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome and found none that ended in Orochimaru's victory. He fled. Again. For the second time. He wouldn't forget it. Ever. The third Hokage collapsed, alive, weakened, but alive. "Naruto," Hiruzen whispered, "you saved me." "You still owe me answers about my parents," Naruto said. "Dying would have been convenient for you. I'm not that generous." A beat. Then the old man laughed. A weak, exhausted, genuine laugh. "You're so much like your mother," he said. Naruto didn't respond, but his eyes shifted from red to something softer, just for a moment. Konoha after the invasion was a wounded city, buildings damaged, people displaced, shinobi killed. The third Hokage survived but announced his retirement. His body couldn't sustain the office any longer. The search for the fifth Hokage began. Jiraiya of the Sannin came to Konoha, the Toad Sage, student of the third, teacher of the fourth, godfather of Naruto Uzumaki, a man who had been absent for 12 years. He found Naruto at Ichiraku Ramen, eating silently. "Hey, kid." Naruto didn't look up. "You're Jiraiya, my father's teacher, my godfather. You were supposed to take care of me after my parents died. You didn't." Jiraiya's jovial expression cracked. Yeah, I was. You chose your spy network over raising your student's son. That's a vector I understand. Strategic priorities over personal obligations. Rational, cold, effective. He slurped his ramen. Don't expect me to be grateful you showed up now. Jiraiya sat down. He didn't make excuses. To his credit, he just sat there and took it. I need to find Tsunade, Jiraiya said after a long silence. She's the best candidate for 5th Hokage. Come with me. Why would I? Because I know things about your abilities that you don't. Your father studied vector theory. It was part of his development of the Flying Thunder God technique. He left notes. I have them. Naruto stopped eating. For the first time, Jiraiya had his full attention. Where are we going? Naruto asked. Tanzaku Town. Fine, but you're paying for the ramen. The trip with Jiraiya was the closest thing Naruto had ever experienced to normalcy. The old man was loud, inappropriate, frequently drunk, and utterly shameless. He peeked at women in hot springs. Naruto reversed the water vectors to splash him. He told dirty jokes. Naruto stared at him like he was an alien species. He tried to teach Naruto the Rasengan. Naruto looked at the spinning ball of chakra, analyzed its rotational vectors in 3 seconds, and recreated it on his first try. It took your father 3 years to develop that technique, Jiraiya said, mouth hanging open. My father didn't have vector manipulation, Naruto said, holding the Rasengan in his palm. He tilted his head. Though the design is elegant, a confined rotation with no directional vector, pure kinetic energy in a spherical loop, no hand signs required, versatile applications. He compressed the Rasengan, tighter, denser. The ball shrank from the size of a baseball to the size of a marble lot, the rotation speed increasing exponentially as the radius decreased. Conservation of angular momentum weaponized. The marble-sized Rasengan screamed. The air around it distorted like heat haze. The ground beneath Naruto's hand cracked from the proximity alone. Vector Rasengan, Naruto said. Miniaturized for penetration, the reduced surface area concentrates the kinetic energy into a smaller point of impact. Same energy, smaller area, exponentially greater force per square centimeter. Jiraiya stared at the tiny, howling sphere. Minato, he whispered to the sky, your son is terrifying. Tsunade was in Tanzaku Town, as expected, drinking, gambling, losing. She had the look of a woman who had been running from grief so long that the running itself had become its own kind of grief. Tsunade, Jiraiya said. No, Tsunade replied. You don't even know what I'm going to ask. You're going to ask me to become Hokage. The answer is no. The position is a death sentence, and the village isn't worth dying for. Naruto looked at her, red eyes, analytical, calculating. Tsunade Senju, granddaughter of the first Hokage, greatest medical ninja in history, last of the Senju bloodline. He paused. You lost your brother and your lover, and you've been drinking yourself to death ever since. Your hands shake when you see blood. You've convinced yourself that caring about anything is a vector toward pain, so you've eliminated all forward momentum from your life. Tsunade's eyes sharpened. Who the hell is this brat? Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the 9 Tails, son of the 4th Hokage, and the person who's going to convince you that running is a worse equation than fighting. You've got a big mouth for a genin, and you've got a big bar tab for a sanin. We all have our flaws. Shizune Tsunade's assistant choked on her tea. Jiraiya covered his face with his hand. He's like this all the time. Tsunade stared at the white-haired boy across the table. Something in his eyes was familiar. Not the color, the weight. The look of someone carrying something enormous and choosing to stand up straight anyway. Make me a bet, she said. You like math so much, make me a bet. You'll lose. You always lose. That's not the point. Fine, here's the bet. I'll show you something that will make you believe the position of Hokage is worth holding. If I succeed, you come back to Konoha. If I fail, I'll never bring it up again. Deal. That evening, Kabuto and Orochimaru appeared. Of course they did. Orochimaru wanted Tsunade's medical skills to heal his ruined arms. Kabuto was his enforcer. The confrontation happened in a field outside town. 3 Sannin and a Genin. Classic setup. Kabuto attacked first. Medical ninjutsu converted to combat applications. Chakra scalpel, precise, deadly, invisible blades of chakra aimed at Naruto's tendons and organs. The scalpels hit the vector field. They bounced back into Kabuto's own body. Kabuto's hamstring severed. His own chakra scalpel, redirected with precision, cut through his leg muscle from the inside. He dropped, eyes wide with shock. "You attacked a vector manipulator with an energy-based technique," Naruto said. "Your medical expertise is impressive. Your tactical awareness is remedial." Kabuto, to his credit, healed himself almost instantly. Cells knitting, tissue regenerating, his enhanced healing factor putting him back on his feet in seconds, so Naruto hit him again. This time physically. A flick of the finger, middle finger to the forehead, the same gesture he would later use at the Valley of the End, loaded with enough vector-amplified kinetic energy to flip a truck. Kabuto flew backward at Mach speed. He hit a boulder. The boulder cracked. Kabuto's ribcage cracked worse. He slid to the ground, healing factor working overtime, but this time Naruto was already there, pressing one finger against Kabuto's chest. Vector change. Cellular vibration. He vibrated Kabuto's cells at a frequency that disrupted cellular cohesion. Not enough to kill. Enough to knock out his healing factor for several minutes as his body frantically tried to restabilize. Kabuto passed out. Orochimaru watched from the sidelines. His arms hung dead at his sides. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to watch his operative get destroyed to know the outcome. He'd already lived it. "Tsunade," Orochimaru called out, ignoring Naruto entirely. "Heal my arms. In return, I'll bring back Dan and Nawaki, Edo Tensei." Tsunade's face went white. Her hands started shaking. "He's manipulating you," Naruto said without turning around. "The Edo Tensei creates puppet bodies animated by the souls of the dead. They wouldn't be your loved ones. They would be corpses wearing their faces, controlled by the man who killed the third Hokage and invaded your village." His voice wasn't cold for this one. It wasn't flat. For the first time, it carried something deliberate and human. "You're a medical ninja. You know what a dead body is. It's a system where all vectors have reached zero. There is no bringing them back, but there is carrying them forward." Tsunade looked at him. "My parents are dead," Naruto said. "I have accepted the equation. Their deaths are a fixed variable. What I do with the remainder of the calculation is not. That's what the Hokage position is. It's not about dying for the village. It's about being the one variable strong enough to change the equation for everyone still alive." The silence stretched across the field like a held breath. Tsunade's hands stopped shaking. "You little brat," she whispered. There were tears in her eyes. "You sound like my grandfather." "I'll take that as a compliment." She kissed his forehead. A quick, impulsive gesture, a grandmother's gesture, a healer's gesture, and the vector field let it through because there was no harm in it. Only love. She turned to Orochimaru. "Get out of here. I'm going back to Konoha." Orochimaru calculated. 2 Sanin plus a vector manipulator who had already beaten him twice. The math didn't work. He left. Third time. It was becoming a habit. Tsunade became the 5th Hokage. She put on the hat, sat behind the desk, and immediately started reforming the medical corps, the academy curriculum, and the village's treatment of Jinchuriki. Naruto never called her Grandma Tsunade. He called her Hokage-sama. Once in private, he called her Tsunade Bachan, and she punched a desk in half, and he reflected the wood fragments back at her, and they both almost smiled. Almost. The Sasuke situation escalated the way a chemical reaction escalates. Slowly at first, then all at once. Sasuke Uchiha had been deteriorating since the Chunin exams. Not because of a curse mark. Orochimaru never got close enough to mark him in this timeline, but the psychological damage was there. The gap between himself and Naruto was so vast, it defied measurement. Sasuke had the Sharingan. He had talent, drive, the genetic legacy of the most powerful dojutsu bloodline in history. And none of it mattered. Because across the village, there was a white-haired boy who could break the laws of physics with a thought, and no amount of Sharingan evolution would close that gap. Itachi made it worse. Of course he did. The Akatsuki came to Konoha, Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki, 2 S-rank criminals in black cloaks with red clouds, walking through the village gates like they owned the place. They were looking for Naruto. They found him at a tea shop. Kisame went first. Samahada, the sentient sword that ate chakra, swung at Naruto's head. Samahada hit the vector field. The sword, which had been designed to absorb chakra, tried to feed. What it absorbed was the mathematical construct of Naruto's reflection barrier, pure computational energy with no nutritional value for a chakra-eating weapon. Samahada shrieked, actually shrieked. The sword recoiled from Naruto's body. the scales flattening in what could only be described as terror. "Your sword is afraid of me," Naruto said. "Interesting." Kasame stared at Samehada. "That's never happened before." Itachi stepped forward, Mangekyo Sharingan blazing, Tsukuyomi, the Genjutsu, the most powerful illusory technique in existence, capable of subjecting the victim to 72 hours of psychological torture in a single second, locked onto Naruto's eyes. Naruto blinked. "Your Genjutsu operates by injecting chakra through visual contact to override the target's neural signals." He blinked again. "I control the electrical vectors in my own brain. Your chakra entered my visual cortex and I rejected it." Itachi's eyes widened a fraction. A fraction was a lot for Itachi. Black fire, the flames that burned at the temperature of the sun and never extinguished. They manifested in the space Naruto occupied and engulfed him. The fire burned for 2 seconds. Then it stopped. Not extinguished, stopped. Naruto had zeroed out the thermal vectors. The black flames, robbed of their heat energy, became inert. Black marks on the ground that looked like spilled ink. "Those flames were impressive," Naruto said. "The thermal output alone suggests a heat source comparable to stellar plasma. Unfortunately, heat is a vector." Itachi reassessed. Like his master before him, he did it instantly, without ego. "We're leaving," he told Kasame. "What?" "Now." They left. The Akatsuki would not return for Naruto for a long time. Not because they feared him, because Itachi needed to report what he had seen, and the organization needed to completely redesign their extraction strategy. Sasuke, who had witnessed the encounter from a rooftop, watched his brother, the man he had dedicated his entire existence to killing, retreat from a boy their age without landing a single effective blow. Something broke in Sasuke that day. Not dramatically, quietly, like a foundation crack that you don't notice until the whole building starts to lean. The Sound Four came for Sasuke 3 weeks later. Not to mark him, not to offer power. Orochimaru's plan had changed since the Chunin exams. He no longer wanted the Sharingan as much as he wanted to understand how to replicate vector manipulation. Sasuke was bait, a lure to draw Naruto out of the village and into an isolated location where Orochimaru's forces could study his abilities under combat conditions. But Sasuke didn't know that. The Sound Four told him what he wanted to hear. Orochimaru could give him the power to surpass Naruto and kill Itachi. All he had to do was leave. Sasuke left in the night. The retrieval mission was assembled by morning. Shikamaru led a team, his first command, his first taste of the weight that came with sending people into danger. Kiba, Neji, hands healed, pride damaged, Choji, and Lee recovered barely. Naruto wasn't on the initial roster. Tsunade had tried to keep him in reserve. A strategic asset wasn't meant for retrieval missions. But Sakura came to him. She stood in front of him with tears streaming down her face and made the one argument that his calculation engine couldn't dismiss. "Please bring him back," she said. "I know you don't care about Sasuke. I know he means nothing to you. But he means something to me, and She swallowed. "I don't have anyone else to ask." Naruto looked at her for a long time. "You're asking the wrong person," he said. "I know, but you're the only one who can." He went, not because Sakura asked, not because Sasuke mattered to him. He went because the equation included a variable he rarely acknowledged, people who cared enough to ask for help. Sakura cared about Sasuke. Hinata cared about Naruto. Iruka cared about all of them. The vectors of human connection were invisible and unmeasurable, but they exerted force all the same. He found that annoying. He went anyway. The retrieval arc was compressed and brutal. Shikamaru's team engaged the Sound Four at staggered intervals, one-on-one fights, desperate, bloody. Exactly the kind of tactical nightmare that comes from sending Jinin against elite operatives. Choji took his pills and fought Jirobo. Won, barely, his body paying the price in permanent damage. Neji fought Kitamaru. Won, an arrow through his shoulder, tactical genius against a 6-armed spider. He almost died. Kiba and Akamaru fought Sakan and Nukan. Nearly lost until Kankuro arrived as Sand Village backup, the new alliance paying dividends. Lee fought Tayuya's summons. Gaara appeared. Sand coffin. Sand burial. Efficient, Naruto blazed past all of it. He didn't stop, didn't fight the Sound Four, didn't engage the obstacles designed to slow the pursuit. Every barrier, every trap, every ambush, he moved through them the way light moves through glass. Air resistance at 0. Ground friction converted to propulsion. trees that fell in his path pushed aside by manipulated gravitational vectors. He was a missile locked on a target, and nothing between point A and point B mattered. He caught Sasuke at the Valley of the End. The Valley of the End. Two massive statues, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, facing each other across a thundering waterfall. The place where the first great rivalry of the shinobi world was decided. The place where, in every timeline and every possibility, Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha were always going to end up. Sasuke stood on Madara's head, the curse mark, gifted by the Sound Four during the journey, a consolation prize from Orochimaru's modified plans, spread across his skin like black fire. His Sharingan was fully evolved, 3 tomoe in each eye, spinning with the frantic intensity of a boy trying to see clearly in a world that had never made sense to him. Naruto stood on Hashirama's head. He looked bored. No, not bored. Something else. Something harder to name. The way a doctor looks at a patient who refuses treatment, concern masked by professional detachment. Naruto! Sasuke screamed across the valley. The waterfall roared between them. Fight me! Why? The single word hit Sasuke harder than any jutsu could have. Because I need to know. I need to know if I can surpass you. If I can surpass Itachi. If I'm worth anything. Naruto looked at him. Red eyes meeting red eyes across 100 meters of mist and falling water. You're asking the wrong question, Naruto said. You don't need to surpass me. You need to stop defining yourself by the people around you. Your value isn't a relative measurement, Sasuke. It's not a vector with a direction and a magnitude determined by other people. It's intrinsic, and you're too blind to see it. Shut up. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to have everything taken from you. I grew up with nothing. No parents, no family, no clan, no one who wanted me alive. You had all of those things and lost them. I never had them at all. Don't lecture me about loss. I'm the expert. Sasuke charged. He jumped from Madara's head and descended toward Naruto with the Chidori screaming in his hand. Lightning chakra wrapping his entire arm, the sound of 1,000 birds, electricity arcing across the water vapor in the air. His Sharingan tracked every micro movement. His speed was elite, curse mark enhanced, emotionally supercharged. Everything he had in a single lethal thrust aimed at Naruto's heart. The Chidori connected. Lightning burst against Naruto's chest. For 1 millisecond, the valley was illuminated in blue-white light. The sound was deafening. 1,000 birds shrieking in unison. Naruto caught Sasuke's wrist. The lightning didn't penetrate. Didn't even singe his shirt. The vector field had analyzed the Chidori in the instant of contact. Electrical vectors, kinetic vectors, thermal vectors, and reflected every harmful component. The lightning scattered across Naruto's body like water off a stone. You just put your strongest attack directly against my chest, Naruto said, holding Sasuke's wrist in an unbreakable grip. And the result is this. He was calm, not mocking, not angry. Calm in a way that was worse than either. Vector manipulation, blood flow. Sasuke's eyes widened. I can feel every vector in your body right now, Naruto said quietly. The blood in your veins, the electrical signals in your brain, the kinetic energy of your heartbeat, I'd reverse any of them. Your blood would flow backward. Your neurons would fire in random patterns. Your heart would stop. You would be dead in 4 seconds, and there is nothing in your arsenal, no Sharingan, no curse mark, no jutsu that could prevent it. Sasuke was frozen, not by a technique, by the absolute mathematical certainty in Naruto's voice. This wasn't a threat, it was a diagnosis. But I made a promise, Naruto continued, to a girl who was crying, which I found annoying. But a promise is a fixed vector, it doesn't change direction. He touched the Chidori with his free hand, reached into the lightning technique with his vector manipulation and stripped it of its harmful properties, reversed the electrical vectors that carried damaging current, negated the thermal vectors that created burns. What was left was light, pure, harmless, beautiful light, flickering between Naruto's fingers like a dying candle. Sasuke stared at his technique, his inheritance from Kakashi, the sound of 1,000 birds, the technique he poured everything into, reduced to a light show in Naruto's hand. You lack the calculations to defeat me, Naruto said. Then he flicked Sasuke's forehead, one finger. The same gesture Itachi used. The cruelest, most personal attack possible, not because of the force, but because of the meaning. Big Brother's gesture. the thing Sasuke craved and hated in equal measure. But Naruto's version carried something Itachi's never did: kinetic energy, vector amplified, the force of a freight train compressed into a single point of contact between finger and skin, delivered to a 3mm area on Sasuke's forehead. Boom! The sound was like a cannon firing. Sasuke's head snapped back. His body followed, launched from Naruto's grip with enough force to create a visible shockwave in the mist. He flew across the valley, not arcing, straight, a human bullet skipping across the surface of the water, once, twice, 3 times, each impact sending up a geyser of spray, each bounce carrying less momentum as the water resistance bled off energy. He hit the far wall of the valley. The stone cracked. A crater formed around his body. He slid down and landed at the base of Madara's statue, unconscious, the curse mark receding from his skin like a tide going out. One flick, one finger, fight over. The valley was quiet after that. Just the waterfall and the wind and the sound of water settling back to stillness after being disturbed by a boy being skipped across it like a stone. Naruto stood on the surface of the water. He controlled the surface tension beneath his feet. Every molecule held in perfect place, no ripple, no disturbance. The water around him was glass still, a mirror reflecting the overcast sky and the 2 stone faces and the white-haired boy standing between them. He looked at Sasuke's unconscious body, assessed the damage: concussion, 2 fractured vertebrae, dislocated shoulder, nothing fatal, nothing permanent. He'd calculated the flick precisely, enough force to end the fight instantly, not enough to end Sasuke. The promise was kept. He raised one hand and rotated his wrist. The air above the valley began to move, a controlled vortex, gentle, precise, the atmospheric vector shaped into a tornado that was more cradle than weapon. It descended to Sasuke's body, wrapped around him, lifted him, and began to carry him back toward Konoha at a steady, safe speed, gentle enough not to injure him further. Precise enough to be insulting. Naruto watched the tornado carry Sasuke away. Then he turned and faced the valley. The 2 statues, Hashirama and Madara, first Hokage and his greatest enemy. They'd stood here and fought for the future of the shinobi world, and the world had called it legendary. And here he was, a 12-year-old boy with white hair and empty hands and a brain that could solve any equation except the one that mattered. Why did it feel like this? He was untouchable, literally, physically untouchable. No one could hurt him. No weapon, no jutsu, no force in the natural world could breach the barrier that surrounded him every second of every day. He was safe. Absolutely, permanently, mathematically safe. And he was alone. Absolutely, permanently, mathematically alone. Because the same barrier that kept out kunai and swords and fire and lightning also kept out everything else. Touch, warmth, the casual brush of shoulders in a crowd, the weight of a hand on your back, the simple animal comfort of being held by another person. His body allowed it in rare cases. Hinata's hand, Inari's hug. But those moments were exceptions calculated by a defensive system, not natural human connection. He had spent his entire life being untouchable, and the word had 2 meanings, and both of them were true, and neither of them was enough. This was the thing no one understood. Not Kakashi, who saw a weapon, not Tsunade, who saw a political asset, not Jiraiya, who saw his student's legacy, not even Hinata, who saw the boy behind the barrier and loved him without fully grasping the depth of his isolation. Naruto Uzumaki was not lonely because people didn't want to be near him. He was lonely because he had made himself into something that existed at a fundamental remove from the rest of the world. Every vector he controlled, every force he redirected, every calculation his brain performed was another layer of separation between himself and the chaotic, messy, unpredictable experience of being human. He had traded vulnerability for invincibility, and the exchange rate was everything that made life bearable. He looked up at the sky, gray clouds, a single break in the cover where sunlight pushed through, painting a gold stripe across the water. The expression on his face was one no one in the village had ever seen. Not victory, not pride. Not the cold arrogance or the psychotic amusement or the flat disinterest that defined him in every public moment. Something quieter, something unresolved. He stood there for a long time, hands at his sides, water still beneath his feet, the valley holding its breath around him. Then he turned and walked back toward Konoha. Each step on the water was perfectly controlled, perfectly silent, perfectly alone. The village was different when he returned. Not physically. The walls were still being repaired from the invasion. The streets still bore scars of combat. The Hokage monument still looked down with stone faces that didn't understand what they were looking at. But the atmosphere had shifted. Word of the retrieval mission had spread. Word of Naruto's role in the invasion had spread further. And word of what he'd done at the Valley of the End, carrying Sasuke back in a tornado, ending the fight with a single flick, had spread furthest of all. The boy they despised, the demon they feared, the white-haired ghost who walked through their streets with his hands in his pockets and his eyes half closed. He had saved their city, saved their Hokage, saved the last Uchiha, defeated S-rank criminals, dismantled elite operatives, and broken every scale by which shinobi ability was measured. And he had done it all before turning 13. The looks changed, not instantly. Prejudice doesn't die quick deaths. But the hate dimmed, the fear evolved. What replaced it was something more complex than either. Awe, tinged with guilt, seasoned with the uncomfortable recognition that the thing you tried to destroy might be the only thing standing between you and destruction. Naruto noticed. He didn't care. That was the point. He had decided, in that alley at age 5, that their opinion was irrelevant, and no amount of subsequent approval would make it relevant again. But Hinata was waiting at the gate when he walked in, not inside, where she could pretend she was just passing by. At the gate, visible, deliberate, she stood with her hands clasped in front of her and her Byakugan deactivated because she wanted to see him with her own eyes, not with her bloodline. He stopped in front of her. "You're injured," she said, even though he wasn't. "I'm not. Your chakra flow is disrupted. I use more calculations than usual. It'll stabilize. You should rest." "Probably." She looked at him. He looked at her. Two kids standing at a village gate while the sun drifted toward the horizon and the clouds moved in patterns that Naruto could calculate and Hinata could simply enjoy. "I was worried," she said. "I know. Your heart rate is 67% above baseline. That's not why I'm worried. I know." She took his hand again. He let her. The vector fit and activate. They walked into the village together. Behind them at the gate, two Chunin guards watched the white-haired boy and the dark-haired girl disappear into the evening crowd. "Is that the Uzumaki kid?" one asked. "Yeah. He just brought back the Uchiha." "Yeah. He threw 100 mercenaries off a bridge." "Yeah. He broke Orochimaru's teeth." "Yeah. He reversed the Hyuga's rotation." "Yeah." The guard paused. "What happens when he grows up?" The other guard had no answer. No one did. That was perhaps the most honest assessment of Naruto Uzumaki that anyone in Konoha had ever made. Not a judgment or a projection or a political calculation, but a simple human acknowledgement that the world they knew was going to change. And the agent of that change had white hair and red eyes and a passive reflection barrier that made him untouchable by anything, except apparently a quiet girl who held his hand without asking permission from physics. Sasuke woke up in the hospital 3 days later. He stared at the ceiling. His head hurt, a concussion from a single finger flick. His pride hurt worse. The curse mark on his neck was dormant, sealed by Kakashi during his unconsciousness. The Sound Four's promises had been lies. Orochimaru's plan had been a manipulation, and the boy he'd tried to kill had carried him home in a tornado. Kakashi visited. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a freight train compressed into a finger." "That's technically accurate." "Kakashi." "I can't beat him, can I?" Kakashi was quiet for a long time. "Then no, probably not. Not the way you're thinking about it." "Then what's the point?" "The point isn't beating Naruto. The point is becoming the strongest version of yourself. Not relative to him, relative to who you were yesterday." Sasuke stared at the ceiling some more. "He flicked my forehead," he said. "I heard. Like Itachi. I know, but it was different." Sasuke's voice went quiet. "Itachi did it to mock me, to keep me small, to make sure I'd keep chasing him. Naruto did it to end the fight as fast as possible so he could keep a promise to a girl he doesn't even like." Kakashi waited. "That's worse," Sasuke said. "That's so much worse, because it means he wasn't even trying. It means the gap isn't something I can close with effort. It's fundamental. It's math." "Sasuke, I'm not leaving the village," Sasuke said abruptly. "Orochimaru's a dead end. I can see that now. If I want to kill Itachi, I need to find my own path. A real one. He looked at Kakashi. Teach me, not to be Naruto, to be better than I am. It was the first mature thing Sasuke Uchiha had ever said. Kakashi nodded, and something in the dynamic of Team 7, the broader Team 7, the one that included all the broken pieces of this generation, shifted into a configuration that might actually hold. Tsunade called Naruto to her office on a Tuesday. Sit down, she said. He stood. She glared. He was unaffected. The council has been discussing your status. After the invasion, the retrieval, and the general pattern of you being the most terrifying thing in Fire Country, there's been a proposal. She folded her hands. They want to promote you to Special Jonin. I'm 12. Kakashi was a Chunin at 6 and a Jonin at 12. Kakashi can be hurt. Tsunade paused. Fair point. The promotion comes with responsibilities, mission assignments at your skill level, political obligations, visibility. I don't want visibility. Visibility is a vector that attracts enemies to a stationary target. You are the stationary target. Nothing's getting through. That's not the point. The people around me can be targeted. Hinata, Shikamaru, Iruka. He paused and something in his voice changed, became almost human. I'll accept the promotion on one condition. My team stays my team. I don't get rotated. I don't get reassigned. Hinata and Shikamaru stay with me. Tsunade studied him. Behind the flat eyes and the arrogant posture and the untouchable barrier, there was a boy who had just named 3 people he cared about without realizing he was doing it. Granted, she said, now get out of my office before I throw my desk at you. It would bounce back. I know it would bounce back. That's not the point. Get out. He left. Was that a smile? No, couldn't be. Must have been a trick of the light. Word spread across the nations. It always does. Information is the most persistent vector in the shinobi world. It flows in one direction, outward, and it never reverses. The name Naruto Uzumaki entered the bingo books of 4 nations within a month of the Chunin exams. By the end of the year, it was in all 5. The classification was unique, not S rank, because S rank implied a threat that could be managed by sufficient force. The hidden cloud created a new designation just for him, unclassifiable combat anomaly. The Raikage read the report and punched his desk so hard it shattered. A genin? A 12-year-old genin? His brother Killer Bee rapped about it for 3 hours. The Tsuchikage read the report and said, very quietly, another yellow flash. Worse. The Mizukage read the report and said, I want to meet him. Her aide pointed out that the last 3 people who met Naruto in combat were currently hospitalized, fled the country, or dead. She still wanted to meet him. The Kazekage, the real one, Gaara's father before his assassination, read the report and felt something he hadn't felt since he'd ordered the creation of the one-tailed Jinchuriki. The cold, practical certainty that the balance of power between nations had just shifted and there was nothing he could do about it. Akatsuki adjusted their timeline. The extraction of the Nine Tails was moved to the bottom of the list. Not because Naruto was the weakest Jinchuriki, but because he was the only one who represented a genuine existential risk to the extraction team. Pain himself would need to be deployed. Maybe even Toby. The world was recalculating. Naruto was eating ramen. The days after the Valley of the End settled into something resembling routine. And routine was a strange thing for a boy who had lived his entire life as an anomaly. He trained. Not because he needed to. His abilities were not the kind that improved with practice in the traditional sense. Vector manipulation was a function of his brain's computational capacity, and that capacity was always growing, always expanding, always finding new variables to control and new equations to solve. He trained because the act of exploring the limits of his power was the only intellectual stimulation available to him in a world that posed no physical threat. He discovered he could manipulate the vectors of light itself, bending photons around his body to become invisible. He discovered he could reverse gravitational pull in a localized area, creating a zone of anti-gravity that lifted everything within it, people, buildings, rivers, and held them suspended until he released them. He discovered that by touching the ground and manipulating tectonic vectors at a large enough scale, he could theoretically trigger an earthquake. He chose not to test that one. He spent time with his team. This was new. This was uncomfortable. This was, according to every calculation his brain could perform, unnecessary and counterproductive. And yet, Shikamaru challenged him to shogi. Naruto won every game in fewer than 30 moves because he could calculate every possible move sequence to checkmate from the opening position. After the 15th consecutive loss, Shikamaru said, "This is the most annoying thing that has ever happened to me," and set up the board again. Hinata brought him food. Onigiri, bento, homemade ramen that was almost as good as Ichiraku's. She left it on his doorstep when he wasn't home and handed it to him directly when he was. The vector field never activated. It had classified Hinata Hyuga as a permanent zero threat, which was, if you understood how the system worked, the highest compliment Naruto's body could pay. One evening, sitting on the Hokage monument, legs dangling over the village, Hinata asked him, "Naruto-kun, are you happy?" He considered the question, ran it through every analytical framework available to him, cross-referenced it with his understanding of the neurochemistry of happiness. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin levels, and their corresponding emotional states. "I don't know," he said. "Happiness is a subjective state that resists quantification. I can tell you that my cortisol levels are lower when you're present, which suggests reduced stress. I can tell you that the computational load of maintaining my vector field decreases by approximately 3% in environments I categorize as safe, and this rooftop qualifies. I can tell you that the concept of returning to solitude after this conversation produces a measurable reluctance that I cannot attribute to any tactical consideration." Hinata waited. "So maybe," he said. "I don't have a word for it, but maybe." She leaned her head against his shoulder. The vector field allowed it. She was warm. It was an inefficient transfer of thermal energy from her body to his. He didn't redirect it. Kakashi found him on the training ground the next morning, standing in the center of a crater he'd made by testing a new technique, vector compression, gravity well, which had created a localized gravitational anomaly strong enough to pull a 2-ton boulder into the earth like it was quicksand. "You need to learn Sage Mode," Kakashi said. "Why?" "Because there are threats coming that even you might need additional tools for. The Akatsuki won't stop. Pain, their leader, possesses the Rasengan, the legendary eyes of the Sage of Six Paths. His abilities might be compatible with yours in ways that create unpredictable outcomes." Naruto looked at the crater. "A threat I can't calculate." "Possibly. That's the first interesting thing anyone has said to me in weeks." He turned. "Where do I learn it?" "Mount Myoboku, the toads. Your father trained there." "Toads." Naruto said the word like it was a math problem he didn't want to solve. "They're nice. They're amphibians." Naruto. "Fine. Let's go learn from the frogs." Mount Myoboku smelled like wet moss and ancient things. The reverse summoning deposited Naruto on a stone plateau overlooking a valley that shouldn't have existed inside any geography he'd memorized. Waterfalls that flowed upward, trees the size of apartment buildings, their canopies lost in clouds that moved in spirals rather than lines. Mushrooms taller than a man, pulsing with bioluminescence. Everything was green and alive and vibrating with an energy he could feel pressing against his skin the way sunlight presses against glass, present, measurable, and completely unable to get through. That was the first problem. Fukasaku, pod toad, elder sage, tiny and wrinkled and ancient in a way that had nothing to do with years and everything to do with having seen the world make the same mistakes for longer than most civilizations lasted, hopped onto a rock and looked up at him. "So you're Minato boy's son." "So I'm told." "You look like him, around the jaw. The rest of you looks like something that crawled out of a mathematics textbook and decided to be angry about it." "I'm not angry." "No, you're not. That's what concerns." Fukasaku hopped to a larger rock. "Jiraiya boy told me about your abilities. Vector manipulation, a reflective barrier that returns all force, a computational brain that solves physics in real time." He tilted his head, a gesture Naruto recognized because he did it himself. "Do you know why you're here?" Sage Mode, the ability to absorb natural energy and combine it with physical and spiritual energy to create senjutsu chakra. Amplifies sensory perception, physical capabilities, and jutsu potency by an order of magnitude. Textbook answer. Correct. Useless. Fukasaku pointed a tiny finger at Naruto's main chest. Sage Mode requires you to stop moving, to become still, to open your body to the energy of the natural world and let it flow through you without resistance. Naruto stared at him. Without resistance. Without resistance. You want me, the person whose entire existence is defined by reflecting, redirecting, and resisting every external force that approaches my body, to stop resisting. Yes, you understand that's like asking a wall to stop being solid. I understand that's the point. The first day was a disaster. Fukasaku placed him on the oil stone, a flat, elevated platform where natural energy concentrated with particular intensity. The protocol was simple. Sit still, empty the mind, let the energy in. Jiraiya had struggled with this. Most candidates did. The difficulty was in the balance. Too much natural energy and you turned to stone. Too little and nothing happened. Naruto's problem was different. He sat on the stone and the natural energy approached his body and his vector field reflected it. All of it. Every particle. The energy came in like a tide and hit an invisible wall and went back the way it came. He didn't even feel it. The reflection was autonomous, his brain performing calculations he hadn't consciously initiated, categorizing natural energy as an external force and doing what it always did, rejecting it. You need to lower the barrier, Fukasaku said. I can't. You can. You choose not to. No. Naruto opened his eyes. They were red, not from irritation, from the computational strain of trying to consciously override an unconscious process. The vector field is not a jutsu I activate. It's a function of my brain. It runs the way your heart beats, automatically, continuously, without conscious input. Telling me to lower it is like telling you to stop your heart by thinking about it. Fukasaku was quiet for a moment. Then he said, your father had a similar problem. Not the same. Minato Boy's issue was conceptual, not physiological, but the root was identical. He was so used to controlling every aspect of his technique that the idea of surrendering control to an external force felt like a betrayal of everything he'd built. How did he solve it? He didn't. He never completed Sage Mode. He relied on the toads to gather natural energy for him and merged with them during combat. Fukasaku looked at Naruto steadily. You could do the same, but you won't. No. I won't? Then you need to find a way to do what no one has done. Lower the barrier voluntarily, not all of it, just enough to create a channel. Naruto spent the second day trying, and the third, and the fourth. The frustration was novel. Naruto Uzumaki did not experience frustration the way normal people did. He experienced computational failures, which his brain resolved by finding alternative solutions. But this wasn't a computational problem. This was a psychological one. The vector field was built on a foundation deeper than mathematics. It was built on the lesson he'd learned in that alley at age 5. Nothing gets through. Nothing touches me. Nothing reaches the thing I am underneath the barrier. Because the last time something reached it, 3 men tried to kill a child, and the child had to become something else to survive. The vector field wasn't just physics. It was a decision. And Sage Mode was asking him to unmake that decision, even partially, even for a moment, and every atom of his being screamed against it. On the 5th day, he sat on the oil stone at dawn and didn't move until dusk. 12 hours. No food, no water, no conversation. Just a white-haired boy sitting cross-legged on a rock, eyes closed, trying to convince his own body that the world was safe enough to let something in. Fukasaku watched from a nearby branch, saying nothing, because some battles could not be helped. On the 6th night, Naruto did something he had never done. He thought about Hinata, not analytically, not as a threat assessment or a vector calculation or a probability matrix. He thought about her hand in his, the warmth, the specific temperature differential between her skin and his, 2.3 degrees Celsius, her palm slightly warmer than his perpetually cool fingers. He thought about the fact that his vector field had allowed it, not because he'd consciously lowered the barrier, but because his body, the autonomous system that protected him from everything, had looked at Hinata Hyuga and calculated, without his input, that she was not a threat. The field could be selective. It already was. It had been every time Hinata touched him. The barrier wasn't a wall, it was a gate. And somewhere inside the computational architecture of his brain, there was a mechanism that decided what to let through. He just never found the controls. On the 7th day, he found them. It started with a single point on his left forearm. a patch of skin 3 centimeters in diameter where he consciously told the vector field to reduce its reflection coefficient from total to partial. Not zero, partial, letting through 40% of ambient force while still reflecting 60. The natural energy hit the gap like water finding a crack in a dam. The sensation was, he didn't have a word for it. Overwhelming wasn't right. Overwhelming implied being unable to cope, and his brain was coping, barely, the computational load spiking to levels he'd never experienced as his system tried to process and categorize an entirely new type of input. It was closer to what a deaf person might feel hearing sound for the first time. Not painful, not pleasant, just vast. Incomprehensibly vast. The natural energy carried information. The position of every leaf on every tree within 100 meters. The heartbeat of a beetle crawling on a stone 40 feet below. The slow tectonic pulse of the mountain itself, grinding and shifting in increments too small for seismographs, but perfectly legible to a brain that was suddenly, for the first time, listening to the world instead of bouncing it away. He gasped. His eyes flew open. The red had changed. The irises were still slit-pupiled, still carrying the sharp computational focus that defined his gaze in combat. But now there were thin rings of gold around the pupils, not the toad eye, orange of Jiraiya's imperfect sage mode, but something geometric, precise, like circuitry etched into the iris itself. Faint lines radiated outward from the pupils in patterns that looked less like biology and more like a schematic diagram. A circuit board drawn in gold on a field of red. He looked down at his hands. The skin was the same pale, translucent white. No toad features, no pigmentation around the eyes, no physical change at all, because the natural energy wasn't transforming his body, it was integrating with his computational system. Sage mode on Jiraiya had been a partial merger of human and toad. Sage mode on Naruto was an upgrade to the processing architecture. His brain, already calculating vectors at a superhuman rate, now had access to the sensory data of the entire mountain. He could feel everything, every wind current across every ridge, every thermal gradient between sunlit stone and shaded soil, the vector of every falling leaf, every flowing stream, every insect in flight within a radius that extended past the borders of Mount Myoboku and into the surrounding ocean. Not just feel, calculate, predict. His brain took the sensory data of nature itself and converted it into vector equations, and the equations told him the future. He could see the trajectory of the world 3 seconds ahead, 5 seconds, 10, because when you knew the position, velocity, and force acting on every particle in a system, you could solve for any point on the timeline. He stood up. The air around him didn't move. It didn't need to. He wasn't projecting force. He was absorbing data. A receptor array shaped like a 13-year-old boy. How does it feel? Fukasaku asked from his branch. Naruto was quiet for a long time. Loud, he said. The world is so loud. Fukasaku hopped down and landed on the oil stone. He looked up at the boy with the circuit board eyes and the quiet expression that was, for the first time Fukasaku had seen, not bored or cold or dismissive, but simply present, aware, connected to the world instead of bouncing off it. In 40 years, Fukasaku said, I have trained 6 sage candidates, 3 turned to stone. 2 achieved imperfect sage mode. 1, Jiraiya boy, achieved functional sage mode through the merge technique. None of them ever did what you just did. What did I do? You kept yourself. The old toad's voice was soft. Every other candidate was changed by sage mode, physically, mentally. You took the energy and integrated it into what you already were without losing a single calculation. You didn't become a sage. You made sage mode become part of your existing system. He paused. I have never seen nature submit to a human's framework before. It's always the other way around. Nature didn't submit. I found a compatibility layer, a way to let the data in without letting it overwrite my baseline. You talk like a machine, boy. I talk like what I am. Fukasaku studied him. Your father would be proud. My father sealed a fox inside me and died. I'll settle for competent. But something shifted in his voice when he said it. Not warmth, exactly. Acknowledgement. The kind of recognition that a person gives when they understand they've crossed a threshold they can't uncross. He lowered his hand from the meditation pose and watched the world. He could see the curvature of vector lines across the sky, invisible to every eye except his, lines of force and energy and potential, the skeletal structure of physics itself, visible now because Sage Mode had given him the resolution to see it. The world was math. He had always known this, but he hadn't known the math was beautiful. He stayed on Mount Myoboku for 2 more weeks. Not to master Sage Mode. The integration was complete, his brain adapting to the new data stream with the efficiency of a system designed to process exactly this kind of input. He stayed because there was more to learn. The oil toad taught him how to extend the duration by refining his energy balance. The elder toads taught him the combat applications, senjutsu-enhanced strikes that carried the weight of natural energy, amplifying his already devastating vector attacks by orders of magnitude. He tested a senjutsu-enhanced air compression on an empty mountainside. The mountain wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't there anymore. A crater 800 meters wide and 200 meters deep, the stone vitrified to glass by the heat of compressed air, ignited to plasma by the amplification of sage energy. Fukasaku looked at the crater, looked at Naruto, looked at the crater again. Please don't do that near the village. Which one? Any of them. Naruto returned to Konoha on a Tuesday. He walked through the gates with his hands in his pockets, looking the same as when he'd left, except for the faint geometric patterns in his eyes that appeared and disappeared, depending on how much sensory data he was processing. Hinata was waiting. She always was. "You were gone 17 days, she said. "I was learning to let things in." She looked at him. Her Byakugan flickered on, instinctive, and she saw the sage energy woven into his chakra network like gold thread through silk. She deactivated it and looked at him with her own eyes. "And did you?" "Some things." She took his hand. He let her. The vector field didn't activate. It hadn't needed to learn that lesson. It had figured out Hinata Hyuga long before the rest of him caught up. 3 weeks after Naruto's return from Mount Myoboku, Itachi Uchiha came back to Konoha, not through the gates, not with Kasame. Alone at night, moving through the village with the impossible silence of a man who had been an Anbu captain at 13 and had spent the decade since perfecting the art of being nowhere. He didn't trip the perimeter seals. He didn't alert the sensor barrier. He moved like a thought through water, displacing nothing, disturbing nothing. He found Naruto on a rooftop, the same one where he and Hinata watched clouds. Naruto was alone tonight, sitting on the edge, legs dangling, face tilted toward a sky he could now read in vectors, every star a point of gravitational data, every cloud a thermal map. "You're the most obvious invisible person I've ever sensed," Naruto said without turning around. "Your footsteps produce no vibration, your breathing displaces minimal air, and your chakra suppression is the best I've encountered. But you forgot about the ambient temperature. Your body heat creates a 0.3 degree thermal differential in the surrounding air. In Sage Mode, I can feel that from 2 kilometers. Itachi materialized from the shadows. He didn't wear the Akatsuki cloak. Plain clothes, dark hair loose instead of tied. He looked younger without the uniform. More human, more tired. He sat down on the rooftop, not beside Naruto, 8 feet away. A respectful distance. "I didn't come to fight," Itachi said. "I know, your adrenal levels are baseline. Heart rate 62 BPM. You're as calm as a person can be while sitting next to someone who broke your jutsu the last time you met. Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi, both ineffective." Itachi's voice carried no bitterness, only data. "I've spent 3 months analyzing what happened. The black fire was negated through thermal vector elimination. That I understand, but the Tsukuyomi failure interests me more. Because Tsukuyomi isn't physical. Because Tsukuyomi operates on a level that should be beyond vector manipulation. It's not kinetic energy or thermal energy. It's a direct neural override. The Mangekyo injects a genjutsu signal into the target's visual cortex, bypassing all conscious defenses and rewriting sensory perception at the source. You're asking how I blocked it. I'm asking what you are." Naruto looked at him, red eyes meeting red eyes. 2 different kinds of red, 2 different kinds of dangerous. "Every interaction between my body and the external world is mediated by vectors. A vector is not limited to physical motion. It's any quantity with magnitude and direction. The electrical signals your Tsukuyomi injected into my visual cortex were bioelectrical vectors. They had magnitude, the strength of the chakra signal, and direction, the pathway from my optic nerve to my visual processing center. I identified them, reversed their direction, and expelled them. He paused. Your jutsu entered my brain and I sent it back. That's all. That's all. Itachi almost smiled. Almost. The way a dying candle almost produces light. You treated the most powerful genjutsu in the Uchiha bloodline the same way you treat a thrown rock. Fundamentally, they're the same thing. A force moving in a direction. The medium is different. The principle is identical. Itachi was quiet for a long time. The village sprawled below them. Lights and streets and sleeping people who didn't know that two of the most dangerous individuals in the shinobi world were having a conversation about vector theory on a rooftop above their heads. I was 13 when I killed my clan, Itachi said. The words came out level, factual, like a report. I was ordered to. The political calculus required it. The Uchiha were planning a coup. The resulting civil war would have weakened Konoha enough for other nations to invade. And the projected civilian casualties in every scenario exceeded the clan population. The math was clear. You solved the equation. I solved the equation, and the solution destroyed me. Naruto looked at him, not with sympathy. He wasn't built for that, but with recognition, the kind one machine gives another. You turned yourself into a villain to preserve a system. You accepted the hatred of the one person you cared about most to maintain a structure you believed was worth maintaining. He tilted his head. And now you're sitting on this rooftop telling me about it because you've started to suspect the system wasn't worth it. Itachi's eyes shifted. Manjikyo, the pinwheel spinning slowly, almost reflectively. I'm dying, a disease I cannot name, and no medical jutsu has been able to halt. I have perhaps 2 years. I came here because I need to know, is there someone who can protect what I sacrificed everything to preserve? Not with ideology, not with promises, with certainty. You want to know if I'm strong enough. I want to know if you're real. The word hung in the air between them. Real. Not powerful, not dangerous. Real. Itachi activated Tsukuyomi. He did it without warning, without hesitation. Manjikyo fully engaged, the genjutsu deploying at point-blank range with the full power of a man who had refined the technique through a decade of espionage and assassination. This wasn't the casual attempt from the tea shop. This was the full, unrestrained Tsukuyomi. 72 hours of subjective time compressed into a single second. The victim's consciousness dragged into a reality that the caster controlled absolutely. The electrical signal entered Naruto's visual cortex. Naruto's brain cataloged it in 14 milliseconds. Bioelectrical vector. Foreign origin. Magnitude, approximately 3,000% above standard neural signal strength. Direction, inward, targeting the sensory processing center, attempting to overwrite existing perceptual data with an externally generated construct. The vector field engaged, not reflection, not this time, something more precise. Naruto's brain isolated the foreign electrical pattern the way a surgeon isolates a tumor. He mapped its structure, every frequency, every amplitude, every directional pathway, and then he did something he hadn't done the first time. Instead of simply rejecting it, he analyzed it, read it, deconstructed the electrical architecture of the most powerful genjutsu in the Uchiha bloodline the way a cryptographer deconstructs a code. Then he dismantled it, piece by piece. The foreign signal dissolved into noise. The noise was filtered out, and Naruto's neural pathways returned to baseline in less than 0.2 of a second. He blinked. Was that an electric trick? In my brain? Itachi stared. The Manjikyo deactivated. His eyes returned to black, and in those black eyes was something that had not existed there in a very long time. Certainty. Thank you, Itachi said. He stood. For what? For being real. He turned and disappeared into the night. No sound, no trace. Just a gap in the air where a man had been, and the faint thermal differential that told Naruto he was already 200 meters away and accelerating. The Akatsuki met in the cave. Holographic projections scattered across the chamber like ghosts at a conference table. Pain, the 6-ringed eyes of the Rasengan, the face of Yahiko, the voice of God. Konan, paper white, folded at the edges. Kisame, all teeth and sword and barely contained violence. Deidara, volatile. Sasori, patient. Hidan, loud. Kakuzu, quiet. Zetsu, both. Itachi reported. He described the encounter with the precision of a man who had spent his life converting horror into data. The vector field, the genjutsu immunity, the Sage Mode enhancement, the bioelectrical manipulation. He held nothing back. When he finished, the silence in the cave was a living thing. The Tsukuyomi, Pain said. His voice resonated through the projection. He dismantled it. In 0.2 of a second, without distress, without effort, as if he were brushing away a cobweb. And Amaterasu, thermally negated on previous contact. He zeroed the heat vectors. The flames died. Kisame shifted. So the Sharingan is useless against him. Both versions. The Sharingan operates through visual genjutsu and predictive analysis. His brain outcomputes the Sharingan's prediction capacity, and his vector field makes genjutsu irrelevant. Yes, the Sharingan is useless. Then I'll cut him in half, Kisame said. You will try, Itachi said, and Samahata will refuse to touch him again. It screamed the last time. Kasame's grin faltered, a sword that was afraid. That was new. Pain spoke. The Nine-Tails extraction cannot be delegated. I will handle it personally. The holographic projections flickered. Even among S-rank criminals, the concept of Pain personally deploying was significant. He was the leader, the god. He didn't do field work. Field work was for subordinates. All 6 paths? Conan asked. All 6 paths, and myself as reserve. Conan looked at Pain's projection for a long time. Then she said quietly, to the cave and to no one, he is not a Jinchuriki. He is something the world has not made a word for yet. No one disagreed. The extraction order is revised, Pain continued. The Nine-Tails moves to the end of the sequence. We extract all other Biju first. When we come for the Nine-Tails, we come with every resource. No margin for error, no second attempt. The projections flickered out. The cave went dark. Somewhere in Konoha, Naruto sneezed. The report came in at dawn. Gaara of the Sand, Kazekage, Jinchuriki of the One Tail, one of only 2 people in the world Naruto would describe as tolerable, had been captured. Deidara and Sasori of the Akatsuki had engaged him above Sunagakure. Gaara had shielded the entire village with his sand, spending everything he had to protect a population that had tried to assassinate him 6 times before he turned 12. The shield held. Gaara didn't. They took him while his sand fell around the village like brown snow. Naruto was eating breakfast when Kakashi delivered the news. He set down his chopsticks. His eyes went red. Full red. The geometric sage patterns flickered in his irises like a system booting up. When? 12 hours ago. The message just arrived by Hawk. Where's Tsunade? Assembling a... Naruto was gone. Not walked out. Not body flickered. Gone. The displacement of air where he'd been sitting created a small vacuum that popped Kakashi's ears. 0 air resistance. Maximum ground propulsion. Sage mode engaged for long-range sensory tracking. He was out of the village in 8 seconds and moving at a speed that would later be clocked by a traumatized sensor nin who happened to catch the edge of his passage. At approximately 400 kilometers per hour, Tsunade found out 20 minutes later. He did what? He left Hokage-sama. Without orders? Without a team? Without! He left his breakfast on the table. It was still warm. Tsunade put her face in her hands. Someone please explain to me how a village with a perimeter barrier, 38 sensor stations, and 200 active-duty shinobi on wall rotation failed to notice a 13-year-old boy leaving at the speed of sound. No one had an answer. Send Team Guy as backup. They won't catch him, but they should be there for cleanup. Cleanup of what, Hokage-sama? Of whoever is stupid enough to still be standing when Naruto gets there. The Akatsuki hideout was in river country. A massive stone structure carved into a cliff face, sealed with a 5-point barrier that required simultaneous deactivation at 5 remote locations. Naruto arrived in 6 hours. He stopped outside the barrier. Sage mode painted the structure in his mind. Every vector, every energy flow, every seal component. 5 points, 5 remote anchors, a sequential deactivation protocol designed to buy time even if an attacker identified the system. He placed one hand on the barrier. 5-point matrix. Chakra flow counterclockwise, anchored at cardinal points with a zenith lock. He traced the flow with his fingers. Same principle as the sound force barrier, but scaled up. Same flaw. He found the conflicting flow points. Reversed 2 of the 5 simultaneously. The barrier tore itself apart in 3 seconds, the cascading failure rippling outward like cracks in ice. He walked in. The cavern was enormous. The Jado statue, the demonic statue of the outer path, loomed in the darkness, its mouth open, the extraction ritual still in progress. Gaara's body hung suspended in a column of blue-white energy, the one-tailed chakra being pulled from him thread by thread. Two figures stood between Naruto and the statue. Deidara of Iwagakure. Blonde hair, single visible eye, mouth hands already chewing clay. He looked at Naruto and his eye widened with something that was less fear and more artistic offense. Sasori of the red sand, hunched inside Hiruko, the puppet armor, tail raised and ready, patient as poison. Sasori no Dana, that's the Vector kid, yeah, Deidara said. His voice carried the particular tension of an artist who had just been told his medium was irrelevant. I know who it is, Sasori said from inside the puppet. This will be quick, one way or another. Naruto looked at them, then past them, at Gaara. How long has the extraction been running? Deidara grinned. Long enough, yeah. Another hour and the one tail is ours. Then I have an hour to take it back and 59 minutes to waste. He focused on Deidara. You're the bomber. I am an artist. You're a terrorist with a clay fetish, sure. Show me your art. That was the wrong thing to say. Or the right thing, depending on whether you wanted Deidara to attack immediately and with maximum emotional investment. C1. Deidara's hand mouths spat a swarm of clay spiders, 40 of them, each the size of a fist, skittering across the cavern floor toward Naruto with the manic energy of their creator. They reached him. They detonated, 40 simultaneous explosions. The cavern shook. Dust and debris and pressure waves cascading through the enclosed space. The dust cleared. Naruto stood in the same spot. His clothes weren't even singed. The vector field had caught every explosive shockwave, 40 individual detonation fronts, each analyzed, reversed, and redirected outward in a perfectly calculated dispersal pattern that sent the force into the cavern walls instead of into him. Kinetic energy, Naruto said. Your explosions are just rapid chemical expansion creating kinetic shock waves. A vector is a vector, regardless of whether it comes from a fist or a bomb. Deidara's eye twitched. C2, the clay dragon. A massive serpentine construct that launched from Deidara's hands and swooped toward Naruto, dropping clay mines from its belly. Each mine was a guided explosive, Deidara's chakra directing them to the target, detonating on proximity. Naruto caught the first mine out of the air. It detonated in his palm. He compressed the explosion, the expanding gas, the kinetic shock, the thermal flash, into a hyper-dense point of energy. Then he flicked it at the dragon. The compressed explosion hit the clay construct and detonated with 4 times its original force in a concentrated area the size of a coin. The dragon's midsection vaporized. The two halves fell to the ground in a rain of inert clay. You're throwing my own art back at me, Deidara screamed. I'm improving it. Your delivery mechanism is creative, but the energy dispersal is unfocused. A bomb should concentrate force, not scatter it. He caught another mine, compressed it, threw it at Sasori's Hiruko puppet. Sasori dodged. The compressed explosion hit the ground where he'd been standing and left a hole 3 feet deep and perfectly circular. C3. Deidara was in the air now, riding a clay bird, his composure entirely gone. He reached into his pouch and produced his masterpiece, C3, the City Destroyer, a massive clay sculpture that he dropped from maximum altitude, aiming directly at Naruto. The sculpture fell. Deidara performed the hand sign. Katsu! The detonation was apocalyptic. C3 was designed to level a hidden village. In an enclosed cavern, the force was magnified. Walls cracking, ceiling buckling, the very stones screaming as the explosion consumed everything in a sphere of white light and superheated air. The smoke cleared slowly. Dust and rubble and the acrid smell of overcooked clay. Naruto stood in the center of a perfectly spherical crater. The blast had been deflected in every direction simultaneously, outward, upward, downward, creating a void around his body where no force existed. The sphere of untouched space was exactly 1 meter in diameter. His hair wasn't even mussed. He looked up at Deidara. Your art is just redirected kinetic energy with bad aim, Deidara screamed. Not a battle cry. Not a tactical response. A scream of pure, inarticulate offense. He was the only enemy in Naruto's career who reacted to his invulnerability with artistic indignation rather than tactical reassessment. You don't understand art. Art is an explosion. Art is beauty in destruction. And you stand there like a wall with opinions. I have better things to do. Naruto turned his back on Deidara, the most insulting thing you could do to an artist, and focused on Sasori. Sasori had emerged from Hiroko during the C3 detonation, revealing his true form, a puppet body, red-haired, young-faced, the core of his living heart visible in the left chest compartment. He had used the distraction to deploy 100 puppets, the Red Secret technique, 100 human-form puppets with bladed limbs and poison mechanisms, filling the cavern like an army. 100 puppets, Naruto said, each with independent motion controlled by chakra threads. Each one tipped with a poison that kills in 3 minutes, Sasori added. Poison is a chemical vector. Chemical vectors operate through molecular interaction with biological tissue. My vector field prevents molecular interaction at the skin level. He walked toward the puppet army. Your poison can't touch me for the same reason your explosions can't. I decide what reaches my body, and I've decided that nothing you have qualifies. He walked through the 100 puppets. They attacked. Blades, needles, poison jets, flamethrowers, concealed weapons of every kind. None of it landed. Each weapon hit the vector field and was redirected. Blades bouncing back to sever puppet limbs, poison sprays reversing to corrode puppet joints, needles reflecting into other puppets and pinning them to the ground. Naruto walked through the army the way a person walks through a hallway. Without urgency, without interest, he reached Sasori. Your heart, he said, touching the puppet body's chest with one finger. The only organic component, the thing keeping you alive. If you destroy it, I die. I know, I'm not going to. You're going to leave. Take the blonde and go. Tell your organization what happened here. Tell them. He flicked his gaze back to the ghetto statue, where Gaara still hung suspended. That the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki says to stop collecting people like trading cards. Sasori studied him. The puppet master's face was eternally young and eternally expressionless, but something in the way he held himself shifted. You could kill us both, Sasori said. Obviously. But you're letting us leave. Killing you takes effort. I'd rather spend on that. He pointed at the yacht statue. Go. Before I do the math on how much faster this would be if you were dead. Sasori went. He collected a still screaming Deidara. He doesn't appreciate art, Dana. He called my C3 bad aim. And they vanished through the cavern's rear exit. Naruto turned to the Gedo statue. The extraction was 70% complete. The One-Tail's chakra was being pulled through a massive ceiling array, flowing from Gaara's body into the statue's waiting maw. The flow was directional, unidirectional. A vector, Naruto placed both hands on the base of the energy column. Vector manipulation, extraction reversal. He identified the directional flow of the Biju extraction, the path along which the One-Tail's chakra was being siphoned, and reversed it, not gradually, completely. The entire stream of golden Biju chakra that had been flowing toward the statue suddenly reversed direction and poured back into Gaara's body. The statue groaned, a sound like a mountain protesting. The seal array cracked. The extraction framework, designed to pull and never push, couldn't handle the reversed flow and collapsed in on itself. Gaara's body dropped from the column. Naruto caught him, laid him on the ground, checked his pulse, weak but present. The One-Tail's chakra was reintegrating, the Biju settling back into its container like water finding its level. Gaara's eyes opened 7 minutes later. He looked up at a white-haired boy sitting against a pillar, hands in his pockets, eyes half closed, looking exactly as bored as he always did. You? Gaara's voice was a scrape. Why did you come? Because I decided to. Gaara stared at him. 2 Jinchuriki, 2 weapons the world had built and then feared. One had become stone, cold and crushing, and had to be broken and rebuilt by a boy who believed in bonds. The other had been born with a barrier that made him untouchable and had never needed to become stone because nothing could reach him in the first place. That's all? Gaara asked. That's all. Gaara closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Thank you. Don't thank me. You'd be less annoying to replace than to rescue, and I still did it. Factor that into whatever gratitude calculation you're running. Gaara almost smiled. You're a terrible liar. I'm the greatest liar. I've convinced the entire world I don't care about anything. But you do. Naruto didn't answer. He stood up and offered Gaara his hand. Gaara took it. The sand that perpetually surrounded the Kazekage's body swirled in agitation. It had been separated from its host, weakened, confused. It brushed against Naruto's skin, and the vector field didn't activate. The sand carried no harmful intent, just the confused protective loyalty of a weapon that had almost lost the person it was built to guard. Can you walk? I think so. Then let's go. Team Guy is probably lost somewhere in river country trying to figure out why the barrier is already down. They walked out of the cavern together. Behind them, the Gedo statue sat silent and dark, one meal short, one Jinchuriki lighter, and the seal array that had taken months to construct was broken beyond repair. The war came to Konoha on a Thursday. Not the fourth great ninja war. Not yet. That was still coming, building like a wave offshore, gathering mass and momentum from every conflict, every extraction, every movement of pieces across the continental board. This was something more personal, more direct, more divine. Pain came to Konoha. 6 bodies, 6 paths, 6 incarnations of a man who had decided that the only path to peace was through the annihilation of everything that made peace difficult, which was, in his calculation, everything. The Deva path walked through the village gates at noon. It didn't sneak, didn't infiltrate, walked through the front gate with the serene confidence of a man who believed he was God and had the firepower to make a credible argument. The other 5 paths entered simultaneously from 5 different directions. Animal path from the north, summoning creatures that crushed buildings underfoot. Asura path from the east, mechanical augmentations converting it into a walking weapons platform. Preta path from the south, absorbing every jutsu thrown at it by the scrambling defense forces. Human path from the west, killing with a touch, ripping souls from bodies with the casual horror of a man checking pockets for change. Naraka path from underground, the king of hell emerging from the earth like a judgment reserved for civilizations that had run out of time. The destruction was apocalyptic, not dramatic, not cinematic, apocalyptic. The difference is that dramatic destruction has a narrative flow. Buildings fall in sequence, dust clears to reveal the villain, the hero arrives at the perfect moment. Apocalyptic destruction is random and total and doesn't care about narrative flow. A school collapsed, a hospital burned. 3 blocks of residential housing ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next when the Asura path fired a chakra cannon down a main street. Kakashi fought the Deva path and lost. He deployed every technique in his arsenal. Sharingan prediction, lightning blade, Kamui, and Shinra Tensei blew him through a wall like a rag doll. He survived, barely. He lay in the rubble with cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder, watching the village burn through one eye. Tsunade deployed her summon. Katsuyu, the great slug, split into thousands and attached to the survivors, providing healing and protection. Tsunade herself stood on the Hokage Tower and poured every ounce of her chakra into keeping people alive. Hinata was on the front line. She shouldn't have been. She was a Chunin, and pain was god level. But she was a Hyuga, and the Byakugan was the only dojutsu that could track all 6 paths simultaneously. She fought the human path when it cornered a group of academy students. She fought it with everything she had. Gentle fist, protection of the 8 trigrams, a wall of spinning chakra that held for exactly 9 seconds before the human path shattered it and sent her skidding across the street. She got up, because Hinata Hyuga always got up. The Deva path climbed the mountain of rubble that had been the central marketplace. It looked out over the burning village with the Rasengan and said, in a voice that carried across the smoke and screaming like a sermon, "This is the lesson of pain. Learn it." Then it jumped, high, higher than any building, higher than the Hokage monument. It hung at the apex above the village, arms outstretched, and the gravitational vectors in a half-kilometer radius began to invert. Shinra Tensei, the almighty push that destroyed the village. Not a building, not a district. The village. The technique detonated outward from the Deva path's body in a sphere of absolute repulsive force. The ground cratered, buildings disintegrated. The shockwave flattened everything within 500 meters into a plain of rubble and dust. The Hokage monument cracked. The village walls collapsed. Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, the strongest of the 5 great nations, home to 80,000 people, was pressed flat like a flower between the pages of a book titled Why Pain Wins. Then the wind changed. It was the first thing anyone noticed. In the silence after the Shinra Tensei, that horrible ringing silence where dust was still falling and the sound hadn't come back yet, the wind changed direction. All of it. Every air current in a 10-mile radius reversed simultaneously, converging on a point at the edge of the destruction zone. The temperature dropped 4 degrees. Every animal within a mile went silent. The birds stopped mid-flight and banked away. Insects burrowed into the ground. A stray dog that had been barking at the destruction whimpered, turned, and ran. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the edge of the crater that had been his village. Sage mode was active. The geometric patterns in his irises blazed gold against red, the circuit board lines pulsing with natural energy that extended his sensory range to encompass the entire destroyed landscape. He could feel everything. Every survivor's heartbeat, 23,847 of them, scattered through the rubble, buried, bleeding, terrified. Every dead body, 1,204 of them, their vectors at 0, their equations solved permanently. He could feel the 6 paths. He could feel the gravitational vectors of the Deva path, still radiating residual repulsive force. He could feel the chakra absorption field of the Prita path, the mechanical signatures of the Asura path, the summoning contracts of the animal path, the soul manipulation frequency of the human path, the metaphysical weight of the Naraka path's king of hell, and beyond them, miles away, in a structure made of paper and pain, he could feel the real body, Nagato, emaciated, barely alive. Pouring everything he had into 6 corpses that walked like gods, Naruto looked at the ruins. His brain processed the destruction, the scope, the casualties, the systematic dismantling of infrastructure, defensive capability, and civilian safety. His computational engine took in the data and produced an output. Not rage, not grief, something colder and more specific. The closest analogy was the feeling of a mathematician encountering an equation that had been solved wrong. Not just wrong, but offensively wrong. The kind of wrong that suggested the solver didn't understand the fundamental principles. Konoha was a system. It was flawed, corrupted, often cruel. But it was a system that contained variables he had decided mattered. Hinata's heartbeat, Shikamaru's breathing, Iruka's voice, the smell of Ichiraku ramen, the rooftop where he had learned that happiness might be a thing he could have. Those variables were supposed to remain constant. They were the fixed points in his equation. Someone had disrupted his constants. He took a step into the crater. The animal path found him first. It summoned a giant rhino, 3 stories tall, armored, charging at full momentum. A battering ram made of summoned flesh and fury, aimed at the white-haired boy standing alone in a field of rubble. Naruto raised one hand. Vector change, momentum redirect. The rhino's charge reversed. Not its body, its momentum. The vector of its motion flipped 180 degrees. 3,000 kilograms of rhino, traveling at 60 kilometers per hour, suddenly traveling at 60 kilometers per hour in the exact opposite direction. The creature crashed into the giant dog the animal path had summoned behind it. Both summons collapsed in a heap of confused, injured flesh and poofed back to their summoning realm. The animal path summoned a giant bird. It dove from above, talons extended, wind screaming around its wings. Naruto compressed the air above his head into a hyperdense disc and launched it upward. The air disc hit the bird at the speed of sound. It didn't cut the bird. It obliterated it. The summon dispersed into smoke before the sound of the impact reached the ground. He looked at the animal path. The corpse puppet looked back with dead Rasengan eyes. Your summons are vectors I've already solved. You're wasting both our time. He flicked his finger. A compressed air bullet, the size of a pebble, traveling at 3 times the speed of sound, hit the animal path in the center of the forehead. The black receiver rod in its skull shattered. The path dropped, one down. The Prita path intercepted him next. It sprinted forward with arms extended, the chakra absorption barrier flaring around its hands. A technique designed to eat jutsu, dissolve chakra constructs, and neutralize any energy-based attack. It grabbed Naruto's arm. The absorption activated. The Prita path's ability reached into Naruto's vector field and tried to absorb it. The vector field was not chakra. It was not a jutsu. It was a mathematical construct. A set of calculations performed by Naruto's brain that dictated the behavior of every physical force in contact with his body. Absorbing it would be like trying to eat an equation. The Prita path's absorption technique latched onto the field, found no chakra to consume, and because it was designed to pull energy inward, began absorbing the only energy available, its own. The absorption reversed. The Preta Path's chakra was pulled from its body by its own technique, the absorption field turning inward, consuming itself. It was a snake eating its own tail at the speed of a jutsu designed to be irresistible. The path's body drained in 3 seconds. Chakra reserves emptied, the black receiver rods losing their signal. The corpse collapsing as the feedback loop consumed the last of its operational energy. 2 down. The Naraka path emerged from the ground. The King of Hell, a massive spectral entity with a head of stone and a mouth of judgment, rose behind it. The King of Hell's purpose was interrogation and restoration. It could determine truth from lies and repair the other paths. It reached for Naruto. The spectral hand of the King of Hell extended toward his chest. Not physically, metaphysically. It was reaching for something deeper than flesh, deeper than chakra, the essence, the truth of the person standing before it. The hand entered Naruto's vector field and stopped. Not because the field reflected it, not because Naruto calculated a defensive response. It stopped because the King of Hell, an entity that existed outside normal physics, that operated on the metaphysical plane of truth and judgment, reached into Naruto Uzumaki and found something it had never encountered. A mind that did not lie, not because it was honest, but because it didn't need to. Every thought was a calculation. Every calculation was precise. There was no gap between what Naruto was and what he presented, because what he was a mathematical engine that processed reality without distortion. The King of Hell could not find a lie to judge because Naruto did not contain the conceptual space for deception. His mind was pure signal, no noise, no ambiguity, no illusion. The King of Hell pulled back, slowly, the way a predator backs away from something it cannot classify as prey. The Naraka path stood frozen. Its connection to the King of Hell carried the entity's confusion back to the black receivers, and through the receivers to Nagato. Miles away in his paper tower, Nagato flinched. For the first time in decades, a physical, involuntary response to the information that his most esoteric ability had encountered something fundamentally outside its operating parameters, Naruto looked at the King of Hell. The King of Hell did not look back. It sank into the ground and did not resurface, 3 down. The human path came from behind. Fast, deliberate. Its hand outstretched for the signature technique, soul removal. A touch to the head, a pull, and the soul was extracted from the body. Instant death. No defense, no counter. You couldn't block something that targeted the metaphysical essence of a person's existence. Naruto didn't dodge. He let the human path touch his head. The hand connected. The technique activated. The metaphysical pull engaged, a force directed inward, reaching past flesh and chakra and nervous system, reaching for the fundamental vector of human existence, the soul. The pull hit the vector field. A soul is not a physical object, but it is a quantity with magnitude and direction. It exists within a body. Removing it requires applying a force in a direction, outward. That force is a vector, and Naruto Uzumaki does not release vectors, the pull reflected, the extraction force reversed. The human path, designed to rip souls out, suddenly had its own technique reflected back through the point of contact. The path's soul, or whatever metaphysical substrate animated a corpse puppet controlled by black receivers, was yanked from its own body by its own technique, amplified by the reflection. The human path's hand went slack. Its eyes dimmed. It crumpled to the ground, the black receiver rods clattering loose from a body that had just been evicted from itself. 4 down. The Asura path arrived like a weapons demonstration. Its body split apart, revealing the mechanical augmentations underneath. Missile launchers, laser emitters, extendable limbs with built-in blade arrays, a chakra cannon in its chest capable of leveling a city block. It was a walking arsenal. A hardware store with the Rasengan. Naruto smiled, not the psychotic grin, not the dead-eyed smirk, a real smile, small and sharp and genuinely excited. Finally, he said, physics. The Asura path opened with a full missile barrage. 16 guided projectiles, each tracking Naruto's heat signature, each carrying an explosive payload equivalent to a high-grade paper bomb. Naruto caught the vectors, all 16. He didn't deflect them randomly. He recalculated their trajectories with the precision of a ballistic computer, redirecting each missile along a new path that intersected with another missile. 8 pairs of missiles collided midair, detonating in a chain of explosions that rained debris harmlessly around him. The Asura path fired its chest. Cannon. A beam of concentrated chakra, coherent, focused, a laser in all but name, burning a path through the air at the speed of light. Speed of light. Interesting. Naruto had never had to deal with a vector moving at light speed. His brain calculated in 2 milliseconds, faster than the beam could cross the distance because the distance was short, but the computation was faster. He didn't redirect the beam, he bent it. The refractive index of the air between him and the beam shifted, Naruto manipulating the atmospheric density along the beam's path, creating a gradient that curved the light the way a prism curves a rainbow. The beam bent around him, curved 45 degrees, and hit the Asura path's own left arm. The arm exploded. The Asura path reconfigured. Remaining limbs extending blades. Close combat. It lunged. Naruto met it with pure vector-enhanced strikes. Each punch carried the kinetic energy of a building collapse, compressed into a fist-sized impact point. The Asura path's mechanical components shattered on contact. Armor plates cracking, internal mechanisms rupturing, blade arrays snapping like twigs. Naruto dismantled it the way a mechanic disassembles an engine, except the mechanic was moving at 100 strikes per second and the engine was trying to kill him. The Asura path collapsed. A pile of broken machinery and dead flesh, the Rasengan dimming in its eyes, 5 down. The Deva path waited. It stood in the center of the crater, the epicenter of the Shinra Tensei that had destroyed the village. The most powerful body, the most important face, Yahiko's face, the face of Pain's dead friend, the mask of God. Naruto walked toward it, across the rubble, through the dust. His sage mode eyes tracked the gravitational vectors surrounding the Deva path, invisible lines of force that pulsed in a rhythm. A cycle. 5 seconds of charge, followed by the ability to use either Shinra Tensei or Bansho Tenin. 5 seconds of vulnerability while the gravitational engine recharged. He counted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shinra Tensei. The almighty push erupted, a sphere of repulsive gravitational force expanding from the Deva path's body at catastrophic speed. The ground beneath it cratered further. The air itself was pushed away, creating a vacuum front that would have crushed anything caught in it. Naruto planted his feet, both hands extended. Vector change, gravitational inversion. He met the Shinra Tensei head-on, not by blocking it, by matching it. His vector manipulation seized the gravitational wave and created an equal and opposite gravitational field, emanating from his own position. 2 repulsive forces collided in the space between them. The ground between Naruto and the Deva path was annihilated. Rock vaporized, air compressed to plasma, the collision of 2 gravitational sources creating a zone of absolute destruction that looked like someone had taken a bite out of reality. The forces canceled. The wave passed. Naruto stood, hands still extended, breathing harder than usual, but still standing. 5 seconds. He counted. The Deva path activated Bansho Tenin, universal pull. The attractive force grabbed at Naruto, trying to pull him forward into striking range. Naruto reversed his own gravitational vector, anchoring himself to the ground with a force that exceeded the pull. He didn't move. The Deva path strained. Naruto strained. For a moment, they existed in gravitational equilibrium, 2 opposing forces locked in a calculation war. Your technique operates on a 5-second cycle, Naruto said, his voice carrying across the broken ground. Charge, deploy, recharge. The gravitational vectors build in a pattern. I can feel them. Compression phase, expansion phase, null phase. The null phase is your vulnerability. The compression phase is your charge. And the expansion phase, he narrowed his eyes, is when your gravitational engine is open. The Deva path pushed. Shinra Tensei again. Naruto countered again. But this time he didn't just counter. During the collision, during the 0.3-second window where the Shinra Tensei was fully deployed and the gravitational engine was open, Naruto inserted his own gravitational vector into the cycle. It was like slipping a gear into a machine while it was running. His vector was small, subtle. A gravitational manipulation calibrated to the exact frequency of the Deva path cycle, offset by half a phase. When the Deva path's engine tried to recharge, it found Naruto's opposing frequency already occupying the gravitational space. Like noise-canceling headphones for gravity, the Deva path froze, its gravitational engine stuttered, misfired. The 5-second cycle stretched to 6, then 8, then 12. The timing disrupted beyond recovery. The Deva path tried to push. Nothing happened. Tried to pull. Nothing. Naruto's inserted vector had broken the rhythm, and without the rhythm, the Renegan's gravitational manipulation was a car without an engine. The Deva path stared at him. Yahiko's face. Dead eyes. The Renegan spinning, trying to recalibrate, failing. "You broke my cycle," it said. Nagato's voice through a dead mouth. "I broke your equation," Naruto said, "because your equation was wrong." He walked forward. The Deva path tried to form a technique. Any technique. The disrupted gravitational engine couldn't produce enough force for a Shinra Tensei, and without it, the path was a corpse with good eyes and no weapons. Naruto placed 2 fingers on the Deva path's forehead. Return. A compressed air bullet, point blank, senjutsu enhanced, carrying the force of a small earthquake focused into a point the size of a fingertip. The Deva path's head snapped back. The black receiver rods in its skull shattered simultaneously. Yako's body fell backward and hit the ground and didn't move. 6 down. Naruto stood alone in the crater. The dust settled. The smoke cleared. The village, what was left of it, was silent. Then from the rubble, a sound. Clapping. Slow, rhythmic clapping, growing faster as others joined. Survivors emerging from the wreckage, from Katsuyu's protection, from the tunnels where Shikamaru had guided them. They climbed out of the ruins of their city, and they saw a white-haired boy standing in the center of the destruction, hands at his sides, sage-mode eyes scanning the horizon, and they clapped. He didn't acknowledge it. He was already looking north, toward the paper tower, toward Nagato. He went alone. Kakashi tried to follow. "Naruto, stay with the wounded. Coordinate recovery. You don't know what you're walking into." "I know exactly what I'm walking into. A dying man with the Renegan who just destroyed my village because he thinks pain is the answer to a question nobody asked." He paused. "I'm going to talk to him." "Talk? The fighting is over. What's left is math." He walked north. The paper tower was exactly what it sounded like, a structure of folded origami sheets, white and angular, rising from the trees like an accusation. Conan met him at the entrance. She materialized from a storm of paper that swirled around the door like a warning. "He's inside," she said. "He's dying." "I know. He has been dying since the day Yahiko died. Everything since then has been a prolonged refusal to follow." She looked at him with amber eyes that held a grief so old it had fossilized. "Will you kill him?" "No." "Then what?" "I'm going to give him an answer." She stepped aside. The paper parted. Nagato sat in a machine. A walking apparatus of black rods and metal supports, his body so wasted that it looked like something a river had left behind. Bones visible through translucent skin, red hair hanging limp, the Renegan burning in sunken eye sockets. He was 40 years old. He looked 100. He looked at Naruto with the eyes of God and the body of a dying man and said, "You defeated all 6 paths." "Yes. No one has ever done that. No one was ever going to accept me." Arrogance. Accuracy. Nagato almost smiled. "Jiraiya sensei taught you too." "Jiraiya taught my father. My father sealed a monster inside me and died. Jiraiya felt guilty and left for 12 years. When he came back, he taught me a technique and told me stories. I am not the product of his teaching. I am the product of a village that threw rocks at me and a brain that decided to throw them back." Nagato's Renegan spun, slowly, assessing. "I destroyed your village," Nagato said. "I killed your people, civilians, children. I did it because I believed that only through shared suffering can the world understand the need for peace. Pain is the only teacher the world respects." "You're wrong." "Am I? Look at history. Look at the cycle. Every war ends with a treaty written in the blood of the dead, and every treaty is a ceasefire dressed in ceremony. Nothing changes. Nothing has ever changed. The system is broken." "The system is broken," Naruto agreed, "but your solution doesn't fix it. It replaces one broken equation with another. You're not solving for peace. You're solving for silence. They're not the same thing." "And what would you solve for?" Naruto was quiet for a moment. In the dim light of the paper tower, his sage-mode eyes glowed faintly, the geometric patterns pulsing, the gold rings catching the shadows. "When I was 5 years old, 3 men tried to kill me in an alley. I reflected their weapons back at them without understanding what I was doing. And in that moment, I decided something. I decided that their opinion didn't matter. that their hatred didn't matter, that nothing they could throw at me, literally or figuratively, would ever reach me. I built a wall, the strongest wall in the world, and I lived behind it for years. He paused. You did the same thing, except your wall is pain. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and you made it your entire philosophy, your entire identity. You turned your suffering into a weapon and pointed it at the world and called it truth. Nagato's jaw tightened. But here's the thing about walls. They don't solve the equation. They just isolate the variable. I know this because I'm the most isolated person alive. I can't be touched, can't be hurt, can't be reached by any force in the natural world. And for years, I thought that was the answer, that being untouchable was the same as being strong. He met Nagato's eyes, red circuits into purple rings. It's not. Being untouchable is just being alone with better justification. And being alone doesn't change the math. The system is still broken. The cycle still turns. The only difference is that you're watching it from the inside of a barrier instead of participating in the mess of trying to fix it. You think you can fix it? I think I'm the only one left who can calculate the solution without flinching from the answer. I don't have ideology. I don't have a grand design. I have math. And the math says that destroying people to teach them about suffering is like burning a textbook to teach someone to read. Nagato stared at him. You have no hope to offer me, he said. No. Hope is an emotion. I don't do emotions well. What I have is a calculation. I am the strongest thing this world has produced, not because of the fox, not because of my father's genetics or my mother's bloodline, because my brain runs equations that no other brain can run. And the biggest equation I've ever attempted is this one. How do you build a system that doesn't require pain to function? And have you solved it? Not yet. But I've eliminated every solution that doesn't work, and yours is one of them. Shared suffering doesn't create peace. It creates a population that's too broken to fight back. That's not peace. That's tyranny wearing a mourning veil. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of calculations, full of recalibrated variables, full of a dying man with the eyes of a god looking at a boy who had never needed to pretend to be divine because he was something more honest than divinity. Jiraiya-sensei always talked about student of prophecy, Nagato said. His voice had changed, quieter, stripped of the divine resonance, the god voice, the pain frequency. Just a man, a broken, dying, exhausted man. He said there would be someone who would either save the world or destroy it. He thought it was me once. It wasn't. No, it was you. Nagato looked at him with something that transcended the Rasengan's analytical capability. Recognition. The kind one equation gives another when the variables finally resolve. Jiraiya-sensei wrote a book. The protagonist was called Naruto. He named you after a character from his first novel, the one that never sold, the one he wrote because he believed in the story even when no one else did. I know. Do you know what the character wanted? Peace. No, the character wanted to understand, not to fight, not to win, to understand why the world hurt so much and whether it was possible to make it hurt less. Nagato closed his eyes. I never understood that character. I thought he was naive. I thought Jiraiya-sensei's idealism was a weakness I'd outgrown. He opened his eyes. But you're not idealistic. You're not naive. You're not hopeful. You're just honest. And your honesty is the most terrifying thing I've ever encountered because it doesn't leave room for the comfortable lies I've been telling myself for 20 years. They are comfortable, aren't they? Naruto said. It wasn't a question. The most comfortable. Nagato reached up, slowly, painfully, every movement costing him, and pulled the machine's support rods from his back. Blood seeped from the wounds. Conan at the door made a sound of alarm. Rinne rebirth, Nagato said. Nagato, Conan started. The technique that restores the dead. Everyone I killed today. Every life I took in your village. He looked at Naruto. This will kill me, you know that. I know, and you won't stop me. No, because the math works. Because the math works, and because you're not doing this for me. You're doing it because you finally solved the equation you've been running for 20 years. And the answer wasn't pain. The answer was that the cost matters, that you can't build peace on a foundation of people you've killed to make a point. Nagato formed the hand sign. Gedo, art of Rinne rebirth. The technique activated. The king of hell emerged one final time, not to judge, not to restore the paths, but to disgorge. Souls poured from its mouth like light from a lantern, streaming across the sky toward Konoha, finding their bodies, restarting the vectors that had been zeroed. Hearts that had stopped began to beat. Lungs that had emptied filled with air. Eyes that had closed opened. 1,204 people returned to the living world because a man with the power of a god decided, at the end, that the equation required him to give back what he had taken. Nagato's body failed. The Rasengan dimmed. His breathing slowed to intervals measured in minutes rather than seconds. Tell Jiraiya-sensei, he stopped, coughed, blood on his lips. Tell him the sequel was better than the original. He died with his eyes open. Konan closed them. Naruto stood in the paper tower and said nothing for a long time. Then he turned to Konan. He was wrong about almost everything, Vlad, but he was right about one thing. The system is broken, the cycle continues, and the only way to end it is to have someone at the center who can calculate the solution without letting the answer destroy them. Konan looked at him. Can you do that? I don't know, but I'm going to solve the equation or die trying, and since I can't be killed, the math favors success. He left the paper tower. Behind him, Konan folded Nagato's body into a cocoon of paper white as snow. Konoha rebuilt. The dead returned. The crater filled with lumber and stone and the stubborn, relentless energy of a village that had been destroyed before and would not be destroyed now. Tsunade directed the reconstruction from a temporary office that smelled like sawdust and sake. The village was different after pain, not just physically, architecturally, existentially. They had seen their city die and come back. They had seen a white-haired boy dismantle a god. Naruto was promoted to Jonin. There was no ceremony. Tsunade handed him the vest. He looked at it, said, "I'm not wearing this," and left it on her desk. He wore the headband around his neck. Nothing else changed. Then the war came. The real one. Obito Ucha, masked, calling himself Madara, declared the Fourth Great Ninja War. His demand was simple: surrender the remaining Jinchuriki or face extinction. The 5 great nations, for the first time in history, chose a third option. They allied. The allied shinobi forces assembled. 80,000 ninja from 5 nations, organized into 5 divisions based on combat specialty, commanded by a unified leadership structure. It was the largest military mobilization in the history of the shinobi world. Naruto was not assigned a regiment. The command staff debated this for 7 hours. The Raikage wanted him in the vanguard. The Tsuchikage wanted him in reserve. Gaara, now Kazekage and supreme commander of the alliance, suggested a compromise that made everyone uncomfortable. He operates alone, Gaara said. Deploy him as a one-man strategic response unit. He goes where the need is greatest. He answers to no chain of command except the supreme commander. You're asking us to give a teenager complete operational autonomy on a continental battlefield, the Raikage said. I'm asking you to acknowledge what he is. He does not fit inside your frameworks. Stop trying to make him fit. The Raikage looked at the battle map, at the estimated enemy force numbers, at the column that read Edo Tensei, unknown number of reanimated shinobi, including former Kaj-level combatants. Fine, he said. Let the monster loose. Naruto entered the battlefield on the second day. The Zetsu army, 100,000 white clones, each capable of mimicking allied shinobi, had engaged the 2nd and 3rd divisions in a grinding attrition fight. The allied forces were holding but bleeding. Naruto arrived at the 2nd division's position at dawn. He assessed the battlefield in Sage mode. Every Zetsu clone was a vector set, a collection of physical forces he could calculate and manipulate. Vector storm, continental scale. He raised both arms. The air across a 1-kilometer front compressed, rotated, and detonated outward in a wall of force that swept across the battlefield like the hand of a giant pushing toys off a table. 12,000 Zetsu clones were airborne simultaneously. They hit the ground at terminal velocity, their plant-based bodies shattering on impact. The 2nd division stared. A chunin from Kumogakure turned to her captain. Is that one person? That, her captain said, is the reason we're going to win. He moved through the war like a force of nature. Where he appeared, the battle ended. Not gradually, instantly. Zetsu formations dissolved. Reanimated shinobi were dismantled. Their regeneration was irrelevant when Naruto could zero out every kinetic vector in their bodies, leaving them frozen in place for the sealing teams to contain. He didn't fight the war, he solved it, theater by theater, division by division, each engagement a math problem with an answer that looked like 12,000 enemies on the ground and 0 allied casualties. The reanimated shinobi were the complication. Edo Tensei brought back legends. The second Tsuchikage, the third Raikage, the second Mizukage, and others. Kage-level combatants with unlimited chakra, instant regeneration, and the full arsenal of techniques they possessed in life. Naruto faced 3 of them simultaneously at the Northern Front. He solved each one differently. The third Raikage's lightning armor was negated by grounding the electrical vectors through the earth. The second Mizukage's Genjutsu clam was dispelled by manipulating the light vectors to render the illusion optically transparent. The second Tsuchikage's particle-style jutsu, a technique that disassembled matter at the molecular level, was the only thing that gave him pause. Because it operated at a scale below his normal computational resolution, he activated Sage Mode. The enhanced processing power let him calculate molecular vectors. The particle-style cube hit his field, and every molecule in its structure was redirected away from his body, the cube splitting around him like water around a stone. He sealed all 3 former Kage in 11 minutes. Then he felt something on the battlefield that his Sage Mode classified as both familiar and impossible. A chakra signature he had studied, analyzed, memorized from the notes Jiraiya had given him. The 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, reanimated by Edo Tensei, stood on a ridge overlooking the Western Front. He was not fighting, he was watching. The Hiraishin markers, his signature technique, the Flying Thunder God, were already deployed, scattered across the battlefield in a pattern that only a master of spatial manipulation could read. Naruto appeared in front of him. Father and son, the living and the dead, white hair facing blonde, red eyes facing blue. "You're taller than I expected," Minato said. His voice was warm, genuinely warm. The Edo Tensei preserved personality, and Minato's personality was fundamentally kind. "You're shorter than the monument suggests." Minato laughed, a real laugh. The kind that said he was delighted, despite everything, despite the circumstances, despite the war and the reanimation, and the fact that he was meeting his son as an undead puppet on a battlefield. Kushina would have said the exact same thing. "I wouldn't know." The warmth flickered. Guilt. "No, you wouldn't. And that's my fault. Factually accurate. Can I explain? You sealed a Biju into your infant son because the mathematical probability of finding a compatible host in time was 0, and I was the only available option. You weighted the village's survival against your son's childhood, and the village won. The calculus was correct. The execution was effective. The personal cost was borne by someone who didn't get a vote. Minato stared at him. You sound like me, he said. The calculating part. The part that could solve a jutsu in 3 seconds. But you also sound like your mother. The part that would tell someone the truth even if it hurt, especially if it hurt, because honesty was the only currency she respected. I didn't come here for a family reunion. I know. You came because you sensed my chakra and you wanted to evaluate me. Minato's eyes sharpened. The Edo Tensei body was a shadow of his living power, but the mind was intact, and the mind of the 4th Hokage was one of the greatest analytical engines in shinobi history. So evaluate. He moved. Hiraishin. Instantaneous teleportation. Not speed, not movement, but a spatial discontinuity that placed him behind Naruto in 0 elapsed time. A kunai aimed at his son's back. Not lethal. The Edo Tensei compulsion forced aggression, but Minato was resisting it, pulling his strikes. The kunai hit the vector field and bounced back. Minato caught it out of reflex and teleported again. Left, right, above, below. A flicker pattern designed to overwhelm sensory tracking through sheer spatial impossibility. He was everywhere and nowhere. A ghost that didn't travel between points but simply existed at each one. Naruto stood still. Sage Mode processed the Hiraishin markers, each one a fixed point that Minato could teleport to. The pattern was a web. The web had a structure. The structure had a logic. Your technique isn't random, Naruto said, catching a kunai mid-reflection and holding it. You pre-deploy markers and teleport between them, But the sequence isn't arbitrary. You prioritize positions that create angular advantages relative to the target's blind spots. The optimal counter is to eliminate the markers. He pulsed his vector field outward, a spherical wave of force, calibrated to interact with the spatial signatures of the Rasengan markers. Every marker within 30 meters was knocked off its anchoring point. The spatial formula disrupted by vector interference. Minato materialized 15 meters away, markerless, eyes wide. His son had just neutralized the Flying Thunder God technique, the technique he'd spent 3 years developing, the technique that had won the Third Great Ninja War, by analyzing its deployment pattern in Sage mode and pulsing the markers out of alignment. "You're faster than me," Minato said. "No, I'm not fast at all. I just don't need to move." Minato lowered his kunai. The Edo Tensei compulsion pushed him to attack. He resisted. The effort was visible, tendons straining, jaw clenching, the borrowed body fighting against the will of its occupant. "I have something to tell you," Minato said through gritted teeth, the compulsion pressing harder. "Something I should have told you 12 years ago. If it's I'm sorry, save it. Apologies are vectors with no magnitude." "It's not that." Minato's eyes, blue, kind, aching, met his son's red ones. "It's that I'm proud of you." Naruto's vector field fluctuated, a micro-tremor in the calculation matrix, imperceptible to anyone without Sage mode or the Sharingan. But Minato saw it because he was the fourth Hokage, and he knew what it looked like when someone's defenses cracked. "Not proud of your power," Minato continued. "I'm not proud of your vector manipulation or your combat record or the fact that you can apparently solve my best technique by pulsing a field. I'm proud that you're here, on this battlefield, fighting for people, for a world, for something bigger than the barrier you built. I didn't come here for. You came because you chose to. Because somewhere inside that calculation engine, there's a variable called the people I care about. And you can't reduce it to zero no matter how hard you try. Your mother called that stubbornness. I call it love. You probably call it an unresolvable variable in an otherwise clean equation." Naruto said nothing. "That's what I'm proud of," Minato said. "The unresolvable variable. The thing that doesn't compute but exists anyway. You inherited your mother's heart, Naruto. You just wrapped it in math." The silence between them stretched across the battlefield. Explosions in the distance, screams. The sound of a war that was still being fought while a dead father and a living son stood in its center. "I need to seal you," Naruto said. His voice was not flat, not bored, not cold. It was steady, controlled. The voice of someone holding something very carefully. "I know. This will end the reanimation. I know. I don't have a response for what you said. You don't need one." Minato smiled. "Solve the equation, son. The one about the broken system. Fix what I couldn't." Naruto placed his hand on Minato's chest. The sealing formula, one of the techniques he'd memorized from the Forbidden Scroll years ago, activated. Minato's Edo Tensei body began to dissolve. "For the record," Naruto said, as the light took his father's body apart, "the variable isn't unresolvable. It's just non-linear." Minato's last expression was a smile, so like Kushina's, that Naruto's computational engine momentarily failed to categorize it. Then he was gone. A scatter of light. An absence where a father had been. Naruto stood on the ridge. He was quiet. His Sage mode eyes tracked the dissolution particles until they faded below visual resolution. Then he turned toward the battlefield. There was a war to win and an equation to solve and an ancient Uchiha to kill. Madara Uchiha returned to the world as if he owned it. Which, in his mind, he did. The Edo Tensei reanimation had brought him back as an undead legend. The man who had fought the first Hokage, founded the Uchiha Rebellion, discovered the Rasengan's secrets, and orchestrated a century of manipulation from beyond the grave. That version was already the most dangerous individual on the battlefield. Then Obito's plan collapsed. The Ten Tails was revived. Madara broke free of the Edo Tensei's control, resurrected himself with Rinne rebirth through Obito, and absorbed the Ten Tails into his own body. The transformation was absolute. The Rinnegan blazed in both eyes. The Rinne Sharingan opened on his forehead, a red eye with concentric rings and tomoe, the legendary dogetsu of the Sage of Six Paths. Six Paths chakra saturated his body. Truth-seeking balls, orbs of pure creation that contained all 5 nature transformations and yin-yang release, orbited behind him like a crown. He floated above the battlefield, not standing, not flying, existing in a state of gravitational independence that said he had moved past the need for ground. This world, Madara said, his voice carrying across miles, is a failed experiment. I am its conclusion. Below him, the allied shinobi forces had stopped fighting, not by choice, by incapacity. The Ten Tails Jinchuriki radiated a pressure, a physical, measurable force that paralyzed anyone below Kage level through sheer atmospheric weight. 80,000 ninja, the combined military of 5 nations, brought to their knees by a single man's existence. Naruto felt it. The pressure reached his vector field and was reflected. He was the only person on the battlefield still standing. He looked up at Madara. Sage mode active, the geometric patterns in his irises spinning faster than they ever had, processing data at a rate that his brain had never been asked to sustain. Madara looked down at him. The Sharingan focused. The Rinnegan analyzed. Every sensory tool available to the most powerful dojutsu in history locked onto a white-haired boy standing in a field of kneeling soldiers. You, Madara said. The vector anomaly. The bingo books call you unclassifiable. He descended. Not all the way. He stopped 50 feet above the ground, floating with the casual authority of a being who had transcended the concept of terrain. I've read the reports. Reflects all force. Manipulates all vectors. Immune to physical damage, genjutsu and ninjutsu. He smiled. The smile of a man who had been waiting for a challenge for a century. Finally. Naruto didn't smile back. You absorb the Ten Tails, 6-path chakra, creation-type abilities, truth-seeking balls that contain every nature transformation. Your abilities operate at a conceptual level, not just manipulating force, but manipulating the fundamental nature of reality. Correct. That makes you the first opponent whose abilities might be architecturally incompatible with mine. The truth-seeking balls don't just carry kinetic or thermal energy, they carry existential properties. They can nullify ninjutsu, disintegrate matter, and reshape physical law within their area of effect. Also correct. Are you afraid? No, I'm calibrating. Madara attacked. He did not start small. The first technique was Chibaku Tensei, the planetary devastation that Pain had used as a last resort. Except Madara's version was not one sphere. It was 20 massive gravitational cores, each pulling earth and stone and debris into itself, forming 20 moons above the battlefield. Naruto looked up at 20 artificial planetoids descending toward the surface. His Sage Mode brain went into overdrive. 20 gravitational sources, each with unique mass, density, and orbital velocity, each exerting tidal forces on the others, creating a gravitational interference pattern of staggering complexity. He raised both hands. Vector manipulation, gravitational field, multi-point inversion. He seized the gravitational vectors of all 20 Chibaku Tensei simultaneously. Not sequentially, simultaneously. 20 gravitational cores, each reversed. The attraction became repulsion. The spheres exploded outward, the accumulated mass blasting away from the cores in 20 expanding shells of debris that arced across the sky and fell harmlessly in the uninhabited wasteland beyond the battlefield. 20 moons. Gone. Madara watched. The Sharingan tracked every vector Naruto had manipulated, analyzing the methodology, the computation speed, the limits. Impressive, Madara said, but gravity is crude. He raised one hand. A truth-seeking ball expanded from his palm, a black sphere that ate light, that nullified chakra, that contained the conceptual framework of all 5 elements, merged into a force that didn't just destroy matter, but unmated. The sphere launched at Naruto. Naruto's vector field engaged. The truth-seeking ball hit the field and, for the first time in Naruto's life, the field struggled. The ball's properties weren't purely kinetic. They weren't purely thermal. They carried yin-yang release, the ability to create form from nothing and reduce form to nothing. Naruto's vector field could redirect physical quantities, momentum, heat, electricity, gravity. But the truth-seeking ball was trying to unmake the concept of the matter it touched. It was an existential threat rather than a physical one. Naruto's brain screamed with computational load. The Sage Mode circuits blazed. He wasn't just calculating vectors anymore. He was calculating at the level of fundamental reality, tracking the interaction between his vector field and a force that operated on a plane he had never accessed. He held it. Barely. his palms pressed against the truth-seeking ball, the vector field not reflecting it, but containing it, creating a cage of opposing vectors that kept the ball's nullification properties from reaching his body. "You're struggling," Madara observed, floating closer. "That's new for you. Give me 30 seconds. "I don't think I will." 4 more truth-seeking balls launched. Naruto released the first and moved. For the first time in a fight, he moved. Not because standing still was a choice, but because the incoming attack required spatial separation. He dodged, manipulated air resistance, redirected ground friction, moved at speeds that bent the light around his body into a red-shifted blur. The truth-seeking balls tracked him. They were guided by Madara's will, adjusting trajectory, accelerating, converging on his position from multiple angles. Naruto's brain was running calculations he had never run before. Not just vectors, conceptual interactions. The interface between physical law and existential nullification. The rules that governed the truth-seeking balls were not the rules of physics. They were the rules of creation itself. And Naruto's system, built on physics, optimized for physics, was being asked to operate in a space above physics. He needed more processing power. He went deeper into Sage mode. Not just absorbing natural energy, opening his field further. The barrier that he had spent his entire life maintaining, the wall between himself and the world, the defensive architecture that kept everything out, he lowered it further than he ever had. 20% open, 30, 40. Natural energy poured in like a dam breaking. The sensory data of an entire continent flooding his neural network. His eyes blazed. The geometric patterns expanded from the irises to the sclera, gold circuits covering the entirety of his eyes. His skin took on a faint luminescence, not toad-like, not animal, but mathematical. The glow of a system running at peak capacity. Every calculation visible as a web of light beneath his skin, like veins carrying data instead of blood. His range expanded. He could feel the tectonic plates beneath the battlefield, the jet stream above, the rotation of the planet, the gravitational pull of the moon. Every vector on a continental, atmospheric, celestial scale was now within his computational domain. He turned to face the truth-seeking balls. And he understood them, not intuitively, mathematically. The truth-seeking balls operated through yin-yang release, which was, at its deepest level, a manipulation of the vectors of existence itself. Creation and destruction were not mystical forces. They were vectors. Direction, into being or out of being. Magnitude, the strength of the conceptual shift. The truth-seeking balls were vector manipulation on a higher plane, the same principle as everything he did. Just deeper, his vector field evolved, not grew, not expanded, evolved. The calculations shifted from physical to conceptual. His field, which had always operated on kinetic energy, thermal energy, gravitational force, the measurable quantities of the physical world, now extended into the existential layer. He could feel the vectors of creation and destruction the way he felt the wind. He caught the first truth-seeking ball. His hand closed around it. The conceptual nullification hit his field and was reflected, not as kinetic energy, but as existential energy. The nullification property reversing on itself, the ball trying to unmake itself and entering a feedback loop that Naruto controlled. He crushed it. The black sphere compressed, destabilized, and dissolved into inert particles. Madara's eyes widened. A fraction, but a fraction from Madara Uchiha was a scream from anyone else. "You adapted," Madara said. "In 30 seconds, you adapted to yin-yang release." "I don't adapt, I calculate." He caught the second ball, crushed it. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Each one seized, reversed, dissolved. His hands moved with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a natural disaster, and the weapons of a god disintegrated in his grip like wet paper. Madara descended, fully. His feet touched the ground for the first time. The statement was clear. He was taking this seriously. Limbo, border jail. 4 invisible clones, existing in a dimension adjacent to reality, invisible to all eyes except the Rasengan, launched from Madara's body and attacked Naruto from 4 directions. Naruto couldn't see them, but his Sage mode could feel them. They existed in a space that displaced ambient natural energy, 4 shadows in the tapestry of the world's vector field, visible not as presences, but as absences. 4 invisible constructs operating in an adjacent dimension, Naruto said. Interesting. They interact with physical reality through limited force projection, but their dimensional displacement makes them immune to normal counterattack. He stomped the ground. Vector storm, dimensional shear. He manipulated the vectors not of the physical world, but of the dimensional boundary itself. The membrane between reality and the limbo dimension was, at its core, a set of spatial vectors, directions in which things existed or didn't. Naruto's sage-enhanced brain found the boundary, identified its structure, and tore it open. The 4 limbo clones were ripped from their dimensional hiding place and deposited into physical reality, where they were visible and touchable and very, very vulnerable. He eliminated all 4 in 2 seconds. Vector-enhanced strikes that carried enough force to shatter dimensional echoes like mirrors. Madara stood alone. No truth-seeking balls. No limbo clones. The Rasengan spun in his forehead, processing the impossibility of what was happening. He was losing. Madara Uchiha, the legendary founder, the man who tamed the 9 tails, the 10 tails Jinchuriki, the closest thing to the Sage of 6 Paths the world had seen in 1,000 years, was losing. Not to another legend, not to a god, to a boy whose brain ran math faster than reality could generate problems. "You're not a shinobi," Madara said. His voice was quiet, reverent almost. "You're not a Jinchuriki, you're not a weapon." He looked at Naruto the way a physicist looks at a particle that breaks every known model. "You're a new law of physics wearing a human face." "I'm a person," Naruto said. "That's all I've ever been. The strongest person, but a person. Persons have limits. Find mine." Madara's final technique was not a jutsu, it was a concept. The infinite Tsukuyomi, the genjutsu to end all genjutsu, cast through the Rasengan reflected off the moon, capable of trapping every living being on the planet in an eternal dream. The light began. The moon turned red. The reflected genjutsu descended upon the world. Naruto looked up. The infinite Tsukuyomi was a bioelectrical manipulation at planetary scale. The same principle as Itachi's Tsukuyomi, but magnified to encompass every neural network on Earth. Light-based delivery, electrical override, sensory replacement, all vectors. Naruto raised both hands toward the sky. Vector manipulation, atmospheric refraction, total inversion. He changed the refractive index of the atmosphere above the battlefield, not locally, globally. His sage mode brain, calculating at tectonic and atmospheric scale, identified the light vectors carrying the infinite Tsukuyomi's genjutsu and bent them. All of them. The light that was supposed to reach the ground was refracted back toward its source. The moon, the Rasengan, like a mirror the size of the sky, the genjutsu reflected, off the atmosphere, back at the moon. The infinite Tsukuyomi, the technique designed to capture the world, hit the barrier of a boy who had decided, at age 5, that nothing would ever touch him. And the definition of nothing now included a wide planetary scale genjutsu powered by the eyes of a god. The light faded. The moon returned to normal. The infinite Tsukuyomi collapsed. Madara stared at the sky, then at Naruto. The Rasengan spun, calculating, finding no solution, finding no counter, finding no path forward that didn't end in the same place. A white-haired boy with circuit board eyes and a passive expression that said the equation was already solved. "You reflected my dream," Madara said. "I reflect everything. Then I'll break you with my hands." He charged, full speed. 10 tails, Jinchuriki speed. The speed of a man who had transcended human limits and operated on the scale of myth. His fist carried 6 paths chakra, the primordial energy of creation, wrapped around a man who had been the strongest of his era and was now the strongest of all eras. Naruto met the charge. He didn't reflect, didn't redirect. He stepped forward and threw his own punch. Sage mode enhanced, vector amplified, every calculation his brain could produce, compressed into a single point of impact at the end of his fist. The punches collided. The shock wave flattened the terrain in a 1-mile radius. Trees disintegrated. The ground liquefied. The sky rippled like water. 2 forces at the absolute peak of what the shinobi world could produce met in a single point, and the universe protested. They fought. For the first time in the story, Naruto fought. Not stood still. Not reflected. Fought. Blow for blow. Vector against 6 paths. Math against myth. Each exchange tearing the landscape apart. Each impact creating craters, not each second of combat containing more destructive energy than most wars generated in their entirety. Madara was stronger. In raw physical output and chakra volume, in the sheer weight of his existence, Madara Uchiha at full power exceeded Naruto's base parameters. Naruto was smarter. Every exchange was a data point. Every clash refined his calculations. Every millisecond of combat taught his brain more about Madara's patterns, his timing, his habits formed over a century of fighting. The gap in physical power shrank with every second as Naruto's vector manipulation found inefficiencies in Madara's attack patterns and exploited them with mathematical precision. They fought for 9 minutes. 9 minutes that aged the battlefield by decades. At the end, Naruto found the opening. A micro-hesitation in Madara's guard, 0.07 seconds where his left side was exposed during the transition between a limbo clone recall and a physical strike. A window so small that no Sharingan, no Rinnegan, no Dojutsu in history could have exploited it. Naruto's brain calculated the angle, the force, the exact vector needed to deliver a strike through the opening. Sage mode enhanced, vector amplified. Every joule of energy his body could produce compressed into a single point. He struck. His palm hit Madara's chest. The vector field transferred kinetic energy inward, not through the body but into it, bypassing the skin and the muscle and the rib cage and delivering the full force of the strike directly to the Ten Tails core that sat at the center of Madara's existence. Vector manipulation, internal kinetic disruption. The force detonated inside Madara's body. The Ten Tails chakra destabilized. The connection between host and Biju, maintained by the overwhelming force of Madara's will, shattered like glass hit by a frequency tuned to its exact resonance. Madara's body convulsed. The Rinnegan dimmed. The Sharingan closed. The truth-seeking balls, already destroyed, did not regenerate. The Ten Tails chakra bled from his body in a rush of black and red. The Biju separating from the host like a parasite losing its grip. Madara fell. He hit the ground. Actually hit the ground. For the first time in the entire battle, his body making contact with the earth in a way that said he was no longer above it. Naruto stood over him, breathing hard. Harder than he'd ever breathed. His sage mode eyes dimmed slightly. The gold circuits is flickering, the computational load finally showing its toll. "You solved me," Madara whispered. His voice was a ruin. His body was falling apart, the Ten Tails' departure taking everything with it. "You solved the equation of the god of shinobi." "You were never a god," Naruto said. "You were a man with a persecution complex and too much power. Gods don't need to conquer worlds, they build them." "And you? What will you build?" "Something better." Madara Uchiha's eyes closed for the last time. The man who had stood against the first Hokage, who had survived death itself, who had absorbed the power of a primordial god and declared himself the apex of the shinobi world, was ended by a boy who had decided, in an alley at age 5, covered in someone else's blood, that nothing would ever touch him. The equation was solved. The variable was eliminated. The war was over. The aftermath was quiet. Wars end with paperwork and funerals, not fanfares. The allied shinobi forces dispersed. The 5 nations renewed their alliance. The Biju were redistributed. The dead were counted. Naruto did not attend the victory ceremony. He walked back to Konoha, alone, through the forests of Fire Country, the same forests he'd walked through as a child when the landlord locked him out. The same paths he'd taken to the academy. The same sky above the same village that had feared him and needed him, and never quite known what to do with the gap between the two. The village had been rebuilt. Again. The Pain reconstruction was barely 6 months old, and already the buildings looked settled. The streets looked worn, the village looked like it had always been there and always would be. Resilient, stupid, persistent. Endearing in the way that organisms that refuse to die are always endearing. He stopped outside the gates, the same gates where Hinata had waited after the Valley of the End, the same gates where 2 Chunin guards had wondered what happened when he grew up, the same gates he'd walked through his entire life, in and out, never quite belonging to the village they protected. He looked at Konoha, the village that had tried to break him, the village that had classified him as a demon, the village that had thrown rocks and poison and hate at a child who couldn't understand why the world was cruel and who had responded by becoming the cruelest answer the world could produce. He could leave. He could go anywhere. The world was a set of vectors, and every vector was his to control. He could walk to Suna, and Gaara would receive him. He could walk to Mount Maboku and the toads would train him. He could walk to the edge of the continent and step off and manipulate the gravitational vectors to carry him across the ocean to somewhere that had never heard the name Uzumaki and never would. He could leave and no one could stop him, and no force in the natural world could bring him back. Hinata was waiting at the gate. She stood the same way she always did, hands clasped, Byakugan deactivated, looking at him with her own eyes because she had always insisted on seeing him as he was, rather than as her bloodline showed him. She was taller than the girl who had left a bento box on his desk. Her hair was longer. Her stance was steadier. She had fought in a war and survived an invasion and held a line against a god, and she stood at the gate like she was waiting for someone to come home from work. "You're late," she said. "I had math to finish." She smiled, not a large smile, a small one, the kind that understood the joke and didn't need the punchline explained. He walked toward her. Each step was perfectly controlled, perfectly silent, perfectly measured by a brain that calculated the force of every footfall and the pressure of every breath, and the vector of every molecule of air between himself and the girl at the gate. He stopped in front of her. She took his hand. The vector field allowed it, the same way it always had. Not because Naruto willed it, not because his brain made a conscious calculation, because the system that protected him from everything, that reflected every force, that made him untouchable and alone and safe and isolated, had a category it rarely used and never fully understood: positive intent, zero threat, classification allowed. She was warm. She was always warm. The thermal differential between her hand and his was 2.3 degrees Celsius, her palm radiating a heat that his body would normally redirect, dissipate, or nullify in the process of maintaining perfect thermal equilibrium. He didn't redirect it. He never had. Not once, in all the years she had touched him. They walked into the village together. The gates closed behind them. The guards watched and said nothing, because some things were not improved by commentary. The streets were busy. Merchants and civilians and shinobi and children, all of them living their lives in a village that existed because a white-haired boy had decided, over and over, to let it. Naruto Uzumaki walked through Konoha with his hand in Hinata Hyuga's, and the village that had spent 12 years throwing rocks at him was warm around him, and the sun was going down, and the calculations in his head were infinite and precise and accounted for every variable in the known universe except the one walking beside him, whose thermal energy he had never once, not ever, not in all the years and all the battles and all the equations, redirected. Some vectors, it turned out, were not meant to be reversed. Some forces were meant to be felt.
And that's how Naruto Uzumaki became the only person in history that the entire shinobi world collectively agreed not to start beef with. If this broke your brain the way it broke mine, subscribe. We're just getting started, and it only gets more unhinged from here. You've been warned.